Then. So, hello everybody. I'm Jamie Ross, the Mayor of the Village of Belcarra, and welcome to everybody to our meeting tonight. I wish to acknowledge that this meeting is taking place on the unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples. Tum-Tumay-Waitin, or Belcarra, is home to an ancestral village of the Tsleil-Waututh Nation. We are thankful to conduct our work within their territory. So I'm going to call the meeting to order at 7:01 p.m. And I've called the meeting to order, and then I'm going to just go over a statement that I have, a statement of clarification. So on behalf of our council, staff, and our community, I want to highlight the need for us to cooperate and engage in a respectful manner with each other and to provide some clarification as follows. Our council meeting now has two sections in regard to questions. Questions during the meeting and during the public question period at the end. Your video does not need to be on during the regular meeting, but if your first and last name must be visible if you want to ask a question. During the public question period at the end of the meeting, your video needs to be visible and your first and last name needs to be visible if you want to ask a question. The key message is for the entire meeting. Participants are expected to engage in a proper manner and conduct themselves in a respectful way when asking questions or making observations. Staff at all times must be engaged in a respectful manner, and questions or comments about legal matters that the village is involved in will not be addressed in meetings. There are other reasons for possible expulsion. The person presiding at the meeting will make the decision if a person is acting improperly and may remove an individual from the meeting as required, consistent with the community charter, expulsion from meetings, and with Robert's Rules of Order. When an expulsion is needed, the person will be removed for the remainder of the meeting. It will be done once the decision has been made by the person presiding over the meeting. It is our hope that this clarification will help us to not need to make this decision. Our council, by its actions, values hearing from our community and is proud that in almost all instances, individuals comment and participating in a manner that reinforces our collective right and responsibility to hold different views in a respectful manner. So I want to thank everybody in the audience for listening to that clarification. And I will move to the approval of the agenda. 2.1 regular council meeting, November 8, 2021. And I'll look for a councillor to move that motion.
So move. Second.
Okay, so the motion that the agenda for the regular council meeting, November 8, 2021 be approved as circulated. Any questions, thoughts from council? All right, seeing none, I'll look to call the question. If you can show your hand and say aye if you're in support of this motion.
Aye.
Aye, and I'm calling it everybody's in favor, and it carries in the affirmative. So moving on to the adoption of the minutes. 3.1 regular council meeting, October 25th, 2021. And the motion is that the minutes from the regular council meeting held October 25th, 2021 be adopted. And I'll look for a mover.
So moved.
From Councillor Clark. Thank you very much. And Councillor Snell for seconding. So the motion's on the floor for discussion by council. Any questions or thoughts? Seeing none, I'll look to call the question. All those in favor, raise their hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, and I'm seeing that it carries in the affirmative and it's unanimous. So we have a delegation from Translink, and I'm going to ask Lorna to, on behalf of our village, to welcome our speaker and presenter. Thank you.
Yes, on behalf of Belcarra Council and staff and residents, I would like to welcome Eve Howe, who is the Manager of Policy Development with Translink, and who is here to give a presentation regarding Transport 2050. So thank you for coming, Eve.
Thank you very much for having me here tonight. I am having some issues with my laptop. Is it possible to have someone share the presentation from your side of things?
Sure, here we are.
Perfect.
Yes, there you
Backup is great.
go.
Thank you, Paula.
Is it possible to, hit full screen there, and then I will walk through. So I'm going to give
And
it.
will you just, sorry, if you just say next page, Paula will turn the page for you. How's that?
Perfect. Yes,
Okay.
will do. So thank you so much for having me here today. I'm going to be talking a bit about Transport 2050, which is our region's long-range transportation strategy. We've been developing this for the past few years now. We started in 2019, and we're heading towards, we just completed our third round of public engagement, and we're heading towards finalizing this draft over the next few months with the aim of having it approved by our Mayor's Council and Board in January. So I'm going to walk through a bit of that process that we've gone through and where we're headed for the next little bit. So next slide, please. So just stepping back a little bit, what is Transport 2050? As I mentioned, it's a 30-year strategy. It's fairly high level. It aims to be a bit of a blueprint for where we want this region to go in terms of its transportation. So not just transit, transportation at large. So if you look back at the Transport 2021, which was adopted back in the 90s, you can see a number of the initiatives that were envisioned back 30 years ago have now come to fruition and really shaped the way our region is today. So that gives you a sense of what it's intended to do for the next 30 years. This is a shared strategy, although Translink is leading it. We work in very close partnership with Metro Vancouver, as well as municipalities, municipal staff, and provincial staff as well. So if we can get the next slide, please. I'm going to walk a bit through the process that we've taken to date and some of the key learnings that we've heard from the public as part of this process. I'll delve a bit more deeply into each of these phases in the subsequent few slides. But we've started off, as I mentioned, back in 2019 when we held our largest ever public engagement process. This is what we call phase 1 engagement. And at that time, we went out to the public throughout the region and even indeed in neighboring regions as well. We tried to reach out to people from all walks of life, independent of how they get around or what part of the region they live in, their demographics. And we asked them about their values, their vision, and their ideas. We then took all of that feedback and we started working on the draft strategy. And in the spring of this year, we went back to the public again as part of phase 2 and asked them about the goals of the draft strategy, as well as 3 transformative actions. And then, as I noted, we just recently wrapped up our third phase of public engagement, which was delving deeply into the draft itself and seeking public input on that. I'll walk through each of these in the next few slides. So next slide, please. So in phase 1, we reached out to the public broadly and we received input from tens of thousands of people. We asked them about what they valued about living in this region, what their concerns were, and what their priorities were for the next 30 years. And what we heard from people were what they value most about living in this region and in their neighborhoods was natural areas and parks, access to shops and amenities, and proximity to transit. We asked them about their concerns, and these are not surprising. People were most concerned about housing affordability, road congestion, and climate change. And then in terms of priorities and shaping the region into the future, we asked them what they wanted to see as priorities, and we heard transit expansion and improvement, transportation options that are timely and convenient, and a transport system that's cost-effective and efficient. Next slide, please. We then took all of that feedback that we received from the public and we started shaping this strategy. We also received hundreds of ideas about how to, what people would like to see over the next 30 years. So from those values and concerns, we shaped our 5 goals for the Transport 2050 plan. And as well, we brought back 3 transformative actions. So the current draft has 126 strategies and actions, but we felt that 3 were particularly transformative. And so in the spring of this year, we brought back those 3 for more public engagement. Next slide, please. So the 5 draft goals, which we shared with the public back in the spring of this year of the draft, are that by 2050, we will have convenient choices that are reliable, affordable, safe and comfortable, and carbon free. And we asked the public how these mapped to their values and what they wanted for the future of transportation in this region. And we heard strong support across different demographics and geographies that, more or less within this region, people shared these sentiments as goals to aim towards for the next 30 years. Next slide, please. And then, so the 3 transformative actions that we focused the public engagement on in the spring of this year were People for Streets, that invite walking, biking, and rolling, fast and frequent rapid transit, that's a competitive choice for most longer trips, and then questions about automated vehicles. So the first one is really looking at a future where there are more people for streets. I think we have good examples, whether it's locally or in other parts of the world, where streets are transformed so that they prioritize walking and rolling, and sort of shift the dynamics of those streets. And we heard strong support from across demographics and geographies for this concept. However, people felt that although they like the concept, how it's implemented needs to really be considered and needs to be done in a thoughtful manner in terms of impacts on goods movement or parking access and those sort of things. So the second transformative action that we asked the public about were how they wanted to see rapid transit build out in the next 30 years. And for this question, we proposed 2 different options, which we called Network A versus Network B. Network A had more kilometers of future rapid transit that looked like what we have today. So SkyTrain above and below ground. And then contrast with Network B, which had more kilometers of at grade, so street level, bus rapid transit and light rail. And then there was a discussion of the pros and cons and the trade-offs of these, because they have different benefits and drawbacks. And so we heard strong support for both of them. People supported both proposals with a slight preference for the street level Network B, more street level rapid transit. And then the last transformative action that we asked the public about were related to automated vehicles. This is an area that we feel we're kind of on a bit of a tipping point of potentially fairly transformative change over the next 30 years with the arrival of full automation of vehicles. And so we asked the public how they felt the introduction of that technology should be managed as it arrives into this region. And so we heard general support for ensuring that there is management of the introduction of this technology, but in terms of how that's done, there was a much more mixed support, with people issuing caution in terms of using fees to manage the entry of automated vehicles. So that was the second phase of engagement, which was in the spring. We then took that feedback and have been working towards the draft strategy. So next slide, please. And that is what we're currently, or just recently completed in phase 3. Next slide. And so as part of phase 3 engagement, we put out 2 options for people to respond to. There was a quick survey where people could read a 6-page summary document that provided an overall, kind of an executive summary of the full draft strategy. And they were able to provide general impressions about that summary. Or for those who were interested, that we provided released the entire 100-page draft Transport 2050 and allowed a more detailed survey where people are able to deep dive onto the strategies and actions. In support of that public survey and engagement, we also held public open houses, stakeholder workshops, as well as elected official meetings, which I hope everyone received their invite and were able to attend if you're interested in attending that. And so at this stage, we've completed that final 3rd phase of public engagement. We are pulling together and analyzing all of the results. We'll be looking to bring a report on December 3rd to our Mayor's Council and December 2nd to our board with proposed revised changes from the outcome of that 3rd phase of engagement. And then we're targeting a January completion of the full draft strategy. And I think, next slide, please. I think that might have been the last one. Yep, so thank you very much and open to any questions.
Very much for that, Eve. That was great. And we'll look to, if we could, and what we'll do is we'll go to council first, and then we'll open it up to our members of our community. So if anybody from council would like to ask any questions or make any comments, I see Councillor Drake. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, through your worship. Yeah, thank you for the presentation. Can you say a few more words about the automated vehicles or self-managed vehicles?
Sure. Thank you for that question. So the draft strategy actually goes into a little bit more depth on what automated vehicles are and the 5 stages of automation. Full automation is kind of what we see as stage 5, and that's where a driver is not required to be paying attention to the road. There's kind of all these transitional phases where, you know, some of the Teslas, I think they're about a stage 3 or so, where you're required to still be attentive and have your hands on the wheel or close by. Or so it talks a bit about that. The main thing that we foresee with the arrival of automation is that it changes the ability in the future of that sense of ownership. You know, it opens up the idea of car share as really, you know, automated robotaxis. It drops the price significantly of, you know, ride hailing, which is now introducing to this region. It becomes automated. You know, the one of the most costly component is labor. So that has potential to really change the way people see vehicle ownership and vehicle use, especially with digitalization and, you know, everything being able to access on your smartphone. So the strategy talks a fair bit about what that could mean and pros and cons, and how we need to start thinking about how to manage this introduction. I don't know if that answers your question, or if you had a specific question about automated vehicles that I could help with.
No, thank you. It's a very good start. I guess the issue for me, it seems to me, it's if it came about and if the cost were low, that it would be a virtual paradigm shift in the sense that it would call into question, frankly, the whole issue of mass transit. Because now, obviously, it gets complex, as you say, because we can't afford to have 300 cars on the road for every couple of buses and train that we're going to be clear of. And there are lots of other strange permutations that could potentially occur as a result of it. And I guess just one follow-up question, and that is, did Translink, and I appreciate there's so many variables, it might be tough to pull it out, but did Translink see any impact with the introduction of lower cost transit in the form of services such as Uber? I mean, obviously the cost for a ride that used to be run, your taxi used to be your option, that became less expensive with some of these ride hailing services. Did you detect any impact on your ridership, or other variables much more significant?
Yeah, great question. Through you, the chair. We have not been able to, so ride hailing was introduced just before COVID hit. I think it was, you know, the approval was just before that. So they took a pretty large hit as well as us in terms of ridership. So it's been difficult to really substantiate. We have been working closely with the province and hope to get data as part of our agreement with them on how ride hailing is being used. So I think with the, you know, sort of COVID ending and return to normalcy over the next few years, I think we'll have a better answer in that time to see what the impact of ride hailing might have been on our, not only our conventional ridership, but also on our anti-dart services. You know, maybe a positive benefit there. Lots of questions about how the impact of ride hailing has been.
I'll just make one more comment, then I'll get out of the way for others to ask questions. It reminds me, the issue of these automated services reminds me of a piece on podcast by Pushkin Industries, talking about the impact of the relatively reliable behavior of an automated vehicle, in that indicating it could cause mass traffic jams because there's no longer any incentive not to step in front of a car, because these vehicles do slow down, notwithstanding the few problems we're having now. And I just thought it was a very interesting observation that could be a huge problem if people are paying no attention to whether they're wandering onto the street in front of vehicles. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Drake, and Eve. Thanks for your responses to those questions. So we'll look to see if anybody else on council has a comment, question, or observation. Not seeing one right now, so we'll look at the audience and see if anybody, Joe Elworthy, welcome. Go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Council, and thank you, Eva, for the presentation. Always optimistic, 30-year plan. Meanwhile, we sit in a horrible scenario with 40% ridership on transit and federal funding uncertain into next year and provincial funding uncertain. So it's a lot of a very interesting pie in the sky, in my view, by the way. And I should say that, of course, autonomous transit, we've had SkyTrain, which is riderless, which your new CEO probably wasn't aware when he came on board, I noticed, right? But he was reminded very quick that we do have an autonomous vehicle called the SkyTrain out here, which is quite interesting. And it brings in the whole question of cybersecurity. And we know the problems you have had with cybersecurity recently, right? And we know the problems they're having today with the TTC and cybersecurity. But I know that these aren't your areas. Your areas is to present the 30-year plan here. It looks wonderful. I presume you've built in climate change and net zero and all the rest into that. And I hope you good folks at Translink will get funding to live into this dream. It'd be very wonderful for a small municipality like Belcarra. It is the feeder systems to these wonderful ideas that becomes very important to this municipality. We community shuttle we operate with right now. Somebody's mentioned Uber, taxis were kicked around the past, but very important stuff. So I'm not going to ask you to answer all those questions. I'm just going to thank you for the presentation.
Thank you very much, Joe, for your insightful comments and observations. And we'll look to see if there's anybody else out in our community that would like to ask a question, make a comment. I'm not seeing anyone else, so I'll give. So it looks like, Eve, we're going to come back to our council, and anybody else on council would like to make a comment or observation? If not, we will look at, let's move that motion. Do we have someone to move the motion to receive?
I'll move that motion, have it received for information.
Councillor
I
Wilder
second.
moving and Councillor Clark seconding. And the motion is that the presentation provided by Eve Howe, Manager of Policy Development, Translink, regarding Translink 2050 be received for information. All those in favor, if any further discussion, all those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
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 Okay, and I note that it's in the affirmative and it's unanimous. And I would just like to say, Eve, thank you very much. You, two of the people on the screen that serve on council have spent time working with you. And I know Councillor Wilder has spoken before about her time doing wonderful work representing our community. And I've just found it very, very interesting. And in particular, I want to thank you for your ability to present very complex issues in ways that you can distill them so they're easier for people to look at. And I count your presentation tonight as a real success. And in particular, thank you very much for the work that you've provided while I've been around the table. And you will know as that, and Eve wouldn't say this, but Translink, we were able to, with the good work of Translink, get that multi-use path funding with all that goes with it. So thank you very much. And Eve, you've had a great presentation because people picked it up, and we would certainly welcome you to stay, but we also know you're busy. So at any time that makes sense, feel free to just disengage from our meeting. Okay.
Thank you very much.
I'd also like to extend my thanks to Eve for all the work on Translink. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eve. We'll look forward to seeing you at the next meeting. Thank you. Okay, so we will go to number 5, reports. And I'm going to ask Ken to outline the next report, 5.1, if you could, Ken. Welcome.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to share my screen.
Okay, good.
Okay, are we all seeing that?
Yeah, that's good.
Yes.
Thanks. Mhm.
Okay, I'm going to highlight the report on the draft 2022 to 2026 financial plan and go in detail through the budget document, which is attached to the report. And this budget document includes what is referred to as scenario A in the report. And scenario A includes a 7% increase in property taxes in 2022 and each year thereafter in the plan to 2026. A 10% increase in water user rates in 2022 and each year thereafter. A 20% increase in ward user rates in 22, 20% increase in ward user rates in 2023, and a 10% increase in each year thereafter in the plan. So right now I'm going to turn to the details of the budget document. There will be opportunities after the presentation to ask questions of anything, and the public will have their opportunity to ask questions and to provide feedback on the various options in front of council or variations of those options. So this is the budget document, and at the beginning of it, we of course have a table of contents which details what's in the document. And there's macro level information as well as micro level information within this document. So anyone can look at whatever level they wish to absorb the information at. There is a summary of the scenario that is outlined in this budget document here on the summary page. I'm going to come back to that at the end of the report. But for now, I'm going to get into some of the detail of the various operating funds and also the capital draft plan, as well as reserve projections. And also I'm going to highlight some of the information that compares Belcarra with its various comparative communities. So first of all, the village, of course, has 3 operating funds: the general operating fund, the water operating fund, and the ward or waste and recycle depot operating fund. And its financial plan is over 5 years, both from an operating and capital perspective. So if we look at the draft 2022 general operating fund budget, we can see that we have approximately $1.5 million of regular operating revenues and about $1.11 million of regular operating expenses, for a surplus of about $428,000 before one-time revenues and expenses. So the area where council brings in one-time money, or actually it's been ongoing for now, is the community works gas tax money. But those monies are immediately transferred to reserves, and they have to be used for projects that qualify under the program, which now the Build Canada program, I believe. So approximately 60,000 comes in and gets transferred to reserve to be spent on special projects. So the special projects that are budgeted in the 22 budget for general operating include the election, which is funded from the stabilization reserve fund, which therefore doesn't have any effect on the bottom line. The OCB review and update is being completed. It was started and is starting in 2021, and this is an estimate of what expenditures are left to be spent in 2022. This number of 80,000 will probably need to be adjusted depending on what the final expense total is in 2021, because the total project budget is $100,000. So this number will have to change depending on what was actually spent in 2021. We see another major project that is being funded from Community Works Gas Tax Reserve money and a grant is the Asset Management and Long-Term Financial Plan project. And that project is $75,000 with anticipated $50,000 leftover spending for 2022. The other major project that we see that is being funded from Community Works Gas Tax is an ongoing asset management program, because once you have an asset management plan, you have to integrate that plan into your everyday practices or ways of doing business. So from a bottom line perspective, the 22 budget includes available money at the end of the day that can be transferred to reserves and surplus of $428,000. So if we look at the revenue picture, the pie, you can see that 56% of the village's revenue in 2022 is coming from property taxes. About 403 is coming from operating grant transfers, and a good part of that, of course, is the small communities grant, which is approximately $250,000. And then, of course, we have the other various reserves that are being utilized and grant for asset management here. And a small amount of income comes in from interest on the district's cash balances. And of course, we also have fees and charges, and that's about 6% of the overall revenue picture in 2022 in the budget. And of course, a big part of that is building permit and development planning revenue that comes in and is projected to be at that level for 2022. So if we looked at the corresponding expense side of the general operating fund budget, we can see the pie broken down. And we can see, of course, that all the monies that are left over at the end of the day of $428,000, which is about 20%, is being transferred to reserves and surplus. And then we, of course, have council and legislative services at 5%, administration, human resources, information services at 18%. We have municipal legal and audit at 7%, planning at 2%, contracted support services, that being finance, engineering, and website at 5%, building and plumbing inspections at 4%, emergency fire and emergency operations at $10,000, which doesn't quite work out to 1%. And we have interest and bank charges at a low $3,400, again, which doesn't register in terms of not being at 1%. We have the transfer to the Community Works Gas Tax Reserve. We have election expense at the 1%. We have the OCP review and update at 4%. We have asset management and long-term financial plan at 2%, and the asset management program at 1%. So those comprise the $1.7 million of operating expenses that are in the draft 22 operating fund budget, which corresponds, of course, with the revenue on the revenue side. So if we look at the water operating fund in the 2022 budget, we can see there's projected revenues of $584,000. And a good part of that, of course, is the annual water fees that are collected on tax notices, which comprises about 58% or $340,000. And then, of course, we have the parcel tax, which comprises 40% or $233,000. And then we have a small amount being transferred from the water debt repayment reserve for payment of water debt. We have a small amount of interest and a small amount for the water system connection fees. So on the expense side, what we spend money in the water operating fund, of course, is on the water system, which is about 16%, long-term debt interest for a water debt at 22%, debt principal at 18% payments. The transfer that's left over at the end of the day is $51,000 or 9%. We have an allocation expense to the water operating fund of 19% or $111,000, and that is for the support that is provided to water for all of the support services, including administration, engineering, finance, etc. And council, of course, passed a policy that solidified how those centralized support services are charged to water, ward, and the municipal road network in a fair manner, which estimates the amount they use of those services. And then, of course, a major part of the water, of course, is the water purchasing and conveyance of the water that comes from the district in North Vancouver. And that comprises about 16% of the pie. So here you can see that there's regular operating revenues of water of $349,000, regular operating expense of $297,000. And at the end of the day, there's $51,000 that's available for transfer to reserves and surpluses. And of course, the money that comes in from the parcel tax and the water debt payment reserve covers the principal and interest payments on the water debt. So these items more or less zero out. And at the end of the day, you're left with this amount of money, of course, that can be transferred to reserves. If we look at the 22 ward operating fund budget, we see $165,000 worth of revenue and the same in expenses and transfers. And of course, the majority of the revenue is again from user fees of $164,000 approximately, and the balance is interest. And in the expense side in ward, you see operation and maintenance expenditures of $102,000. You see the allocation of those centralized support services at $55,000. You see transfers to general equipment and capital reserves at $6,000. And you see transfer to surplus of $1,100 approximately. So that all equates to regular operating expenses of $165,000. Regular operating revenues of $165,000, regular operating expenses of $157,000 with $7,200 available for transfer to reserves and surplus. So if we look at the capital plan in the draft We have over the 5 years, approximately $2.2 million worth of capital expending. And you can see that a good portion of that is coming in the general capital area, from general capital to public works, vehicles and attachments. The non-MRN roads, the MRN roads, the storm sewer and the trail system. And you can also see there's a substantial amount of capital money being allocated in water. In 2022, there's 157,000 and a smaller amount in 22 for the ward capital spending of 8,000. So the total capital expenditures in the draft plan are 641,000 in 2022. And then as we go through this document, we can see more details as to what projects comprise that figure. So at the end of the day, we always look and see how much the village's reserves and surplus balances are growing by, so that there is money being set aside for the replacement of assets and new infrastructure into the future. And right now in the draft 5-year plan, you can see that the total reserve and surplus balances are projected to grow from 2,081,000 2021 to about 4.2 million in 20 and 26. This, of course, is dependent on the capital spending program in particular, and any one-time projects that would be funded from reserves and surpluses. So when you look at the property tax impact here, you can see that, again, this includes scenario A, which is the 7% increase in property taxes, the 10% increase in water, and the 20% increase in ward. And you can see here that the ward, on an average home of $1.994 million, property taxes go to about $32.77. The ward user free goes to about 446. The total charges for water, including the parcel tax for those connected, goes to about $2,300. And those not connected, it goes to about $1,900. So that, of course, is the 7% increase in property taxes, 20% increase in 21, 22, and 23 in ward, and then the water connected fee increase would be 10% across the board, and the same with the not connected fee. So when we look at the longer 5-year plan, you know, some of the highlights in 22, of course, are the increase in the centralized support costs that are being charged to MRN, ward, and water. And through the council policy in 2021, the charge out rate for centralized support costs was at the 50% level. And in 2022, it will be at the 75% level. And then you see, of course, those major projects are in 2022, being the OCP and the asset management long-term financial plan, and funding for the ongoing asset management program. And of course, there's money at the end of the day for the transfer to reserves and surpluses. And if you look at the longer term picture in general operating, you can see that the centralized support costs would go to 100% in 2023 and each year thereafter, so that there's full recovery. There are also ongoing money for asset management, again, for 23 and 24. And then you see the reserve and surplus transfers each year increasing. and going to the $860,000 level in 2026. So this is the minute detail of the general operating fund budget for each of the 5 years. And this shows the change from 21 to 22. I'm not going to go into great deal here, but if anyone has any questions on some of this detail, I'd be happy to answer it. So if we look at the water picture, again, to highlight the change in the support cost at 75% in 2022. And then, of course, the major impact for water is the 4.1% increase in water purchase costs from Metro Vancouver in 2022. And in 23 to 26, you have the 100% increase to full allocation of centralized support costs, the 10% ongoing increase in water user rates, and the further increases in the Metro Vancouver water rates of 6.1% in 2023, 10.6% in 2024, 11.7% in 2025, and 11.5% in 2026. And then the transfers with those 10% increases in water rates grow to 107,000 in 2026. And if you'll note here, for every 1% increase in water rates, an additional $3,100 of additional revenue is generated for the water operating fund. And again, the detail over the 5 years is shown here in the budget document. And this picture here highlights the pay down of the water debt and the various opportunities for paying out that debt. And of course, in 2022, there will be a payout opportunity, and the total payout would be $3.16 million. The next payout opportunity would be in 2027, and the payout would be $2.305 million. And in 2032 would be the next payout opportunity at $1.265 million. These numbers will change based on the refinancing that the MFA undertakes for the new debt. So these numbers could change based on refinancing at lower interest rates. So if we look at the ward operating fund, we can see, of course, the 20% increase in ward in 2022, and that it was implemented in scenario A to prevent any further deficits in the ward area, which of course had a projected deficit in 2021, which was being funded from ward surplus. So the larger increase in 2022 was in the draft budget to prevent that situation. And of course, we see that we have the 75% level of centralized support costs. The other highlight, of course, is we've had a reduction in the budgeted costs of collection, hauling, and disposal of waste, recyclables, and organics based on a new agreement with the contractor. So in the longer term picture, of course, in the plan, there is the 20% increase in 2023 in ward user rates in scenario A and 10% in each year thereafter. And you see the full implementation of the centralized support costs and having money left over at the end of the day in 2026 of $73,000 that is available for transfer. So you can see here that for every 1% increase in ward user rates, approximately $1,350 of additional revenue is generated. And here, this highlights the details of the ward 5-year plan, and highlights the various revenues and expenses over that time period. So when we now look at the 5-year capital plan details, we can see that in 2022, there's $642,000 of capital projects planned for, $100,000 for Marine Avenue Mill and Fill, $143,000 to complete the multi-year use path, which is 75% funded by Translink, $40,000 to replace a Bedbull Bay road culvert, $30,000 to start a universal water metering project, $30,000 for a new water meter for leak detection at Tatlow, $20,000 for the water system engineering, and $52,000 for SCADA, and $50,000 for the Bedwell Bay safety barriers. And of course, these are funded through a grant application at 75% from Translink. And from the period of 23 to 26, there's approximately $1.5 million of spending, with continued capital spending on the universal water metering, SCADA, water engineering projects, and major vehicle replacements, public works vehicle shelter, a retaining wall replacement, and various road improvements. So this here highlights the various funding sources that will be utilized to fund the capital plan. And you can see here, this also shows what the 21 capital spending plan was and what is anticipated to be used or spent in 2021 as well, in comparison, for comparison purposes going forward. So these are the details here of the capital plan. And again, it shows each project that is being implemented. And it shows the various funding sources for each of the projects here. The names of those funding sources are highlighted up here. So the initials translate into these full explanations. So when you look at the reserve and surplus projections, you know, these are key, of course, to moving toward greater financial sustainability at the village. And so this shows how each of the reserves and surpluses will grow based on the spending and the capital and operating spending in the financial plan. And you can see, of course, that the reserves, as we highlighted earlier, are projected to go from about 2.081 million to 4.2 million. I would just like to highlight this amount here for community works because the report does highlight that the UBCM is asking municipalities to do the majority of spending of that by 2024, which of course will have to be looked at as we go forward as to which further projects could be undertaken to substantially utilize these monies. It's not expected that this program will end, but it may change in its format. So now we get into this section, a comparison between Belcarra and its comparative communities, and those being Anmar, Bowen Island, and Lions Bay. And some of this information, of course, has some trends to it, and it's very, has to be used with caution as well, because each community has a particular tax base or assessment base. And so no two communities are directly comparable, but there are general trends that you can see happening. And the average value home for Belcaria is at 1.994 million, which is very close to Anmore. The representative house value in the BC government statistics shows Belcaria at 1.36 million, but that is artificially low because it takes into account the water lots. When we take the water lots out of it, it's at $1.994 million, which makes a lot more sense. And so the comparisons that you see here are based on Belcaria having an average assessed value home of $1.994 million, not the $1.366 million. So when you look at in 2020, the latest financial figures that were available for comparison, cash surplus funds, Anmore had $2.7 million, Belcaria had $543,000, Bowen Island had 7.6 million, and Lions Bay had 3.2 million. And we look at the reserve funds that each community had in 2020. Anmore had 7.1 at the end of the year. Belcaria had 1.5 million. Bowen Island had 5.2 million, and Lions Bay had 1.5 million. If we look at the debt outstanding per capita for each community, of course, Anmore had 0, and the per capita in Belcaria was $4,900 approximately, $1,100 for Bowen Island, and $1,600 for Lions Bay. This figure for Belcaria, of course, is affected entirely by the large water debt that Belcaria has. And the other communities, of course, don't have such a debt. And of course, this is being funded via the parcel tax. And so when we look at net financial assets and debt, you see in 2020, Anmore had net financial assets of $9.7 million. Belcaria had net debt of $1.4 million. Bowen Island had $8.4 million of net assets, financial assets, and Lions Bay had $2.5 million of financial assets. This figure here was substantially reduced from 2019, and we expect it to go substantially down and more positive for 2021 after the year-end numbers come in. And now if you look at the 21 comparisons for that average home in each community, you can see here in terms of general municipal taxes, the average home in Anmore was at $3,100, Belcaria $2,800, Bowen Island $2,600, and Lions Bay $3,000 approximately. You can see that if you take into account municipal taxes, user fees, and parcel taxes, that Anmore is at about $4,500 per year for our residents, and Belcaria is at $5,200, Bowen Island is at $5,200, and Lions Bay is about $5,100, approaching $5,200. And of course, Belcaria's $5,200 is largely impacted by the parcel tax, of course, in Belcaria. And if you look at the user fees and parcel taxes solely on a representative house, you can see here in Anmore it's at $1,400, $2,400 for Belcaria, $2,500 for Bowen Island, and about $2,000 for Lions Bay. And if you look at the total taxes, user fees and parcel taxes together, you can see here that it's, and this includes taxes not only from municipal taxes, but all taxing authorities. So that would include things like school taxes as well. You can see here in Anmore that is at $8,400, about $9,000 in Belcaria, about $7,000 in Bowen Island, about 7,400 in Lions Bay. And this shows the average assessed value of homes that are being used to calculate the taxes and et cetera on for each community. And you see here a representative home in Amor is about 2,031,000, 1.9 million in Belcarra, about 1.2 million in Bowen Island, and about 1.6 million in Lions Bay. So the numbers up here are largely driven by these average assessed values on a representative home. So right now, I'm just going to go back to the cover report. And then we will go into some of the other scenarios that are provided for comparison purposes. So again, scenario A. With scenario A, which is the 7% increase in property taxes, 10% increase in water user rates, and 20% increase in ward rates for 22 and 23, and 10% thereafter, you can see here that the available money that can be transferred is approximately $547,000 for all of the operating areas, and it grows to about $1 million at the end of 2026. So, of course, when you have successive increases, they become cumulative year after year. So in other words, if you have a large increase in ward user rates, then the next year's user rate would be calculated on top of the previous year's rate and plus the base rate, which means you get a faster accumulation of funds that occurs. So if you look at scenario B and say that if there's a 5% increase in property taxes, a 12% increase in water user rates in each year, and a 12% in ward user rates, the total transfers, of course, are lower, and they go from 524,000 to 946,000 at the end of 2026. And you can see here, with only a 12% increase in ward user rates, you have a deficit here in the ward area. And that deficit is eliminated starting in 2024. So if you look at scenario C, you see that with a 10% increase in property taxes, 15% increase in water user rates in each year, and 15% increase in ward user rates in each year, that you, of course, have higher overall transfers at $583,000 in 2022, 760,000 in 2023, 941,000, 1.1 million, and 1.374 million. It's more accelerated money going into reserves and surpluses. And it is, of course, allows for the buildup of the reserves and surpluses in a more expedient manner. And you can see as a comparison that $446,000 available transfers were in the 2021 budget. So if we look at the average assessed value home and the three scenarios, that we see that the property tax increase in scenario A would equate to a $214 increase on an average home, 125 increase in water user fees, and 74 dollar increase in the ward user fee. Of course, the parcel tax would remain the same. So the overall increase for scenario A would be $413 for a house that's connected to the water system, and $376 for a house that was not connected to the water system. And in scenario B, you can see the overall increase would be $348, and that would be $153 increase in property taxes, $150 increase in water user rates, and a $45 increase in ward user rates for a house that was connected to the water system. And the overall increase would be $303 for a house not connected. Again, when you look at scenario C, which has the higher property tax increase, you can see that the increase would come up to $306 for an average home on property taxes, $188 for water user fees, $56 for ward user fees, for a total of $550 increase. And the increase for a home not connected would be a total of $494. So that concludes the presentation, and I would be glad to answer any questions. Mr. Mary, would you like me to keep on the screen sharing?
Yeah, let's, I think it's probably good to have it there. What does council feel? Keep the
Yeah, that's
screen sharing?
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would keep it the
there,
screen.
yeah.
Okay. So Ken, did you want to go to council, or did you want to go directly to the community?
Whatever council prefers.
Okay, so council, what's your sense? Do you want to have Ken go directly to the community? Do you want to, does anybody have some questions they want to pose right now?
Sorry.
Yeah, I have questions, but I'm happy to wait till the community's had a chance to comment. I understood tonight was primarily for the public.
Yeah. Okay, good. Carolina, did you have any?
No, I
Right
was
now?
going to say exactly what Councillor Drake just said. I understood that tonight was for the public as well. I'll save my
Okay,
questions. Thank you.
good. So, and Lisa and,
Concur.
yeah. And John, you concur too? I'll take that as concurrence.
Yes, that I concur.
Okay, good. So why don't we go to the audience, and Ken's available for questions and comments or observations, and I think that would be helpful.
It's just difficult to see when hands are up, when the screen keeps Ken's presentation up.
Oh, okay. I was gonna, I think I've got that if people, only because I don't have the screen. So I've gone to the thing and I can see people in the audience, I believe, if they're,
Good.
putting their,
Okay.
but if I miss, I mean, we can always have someone just verbally say it between that. Lorna, you and I should be able to get it.
Sure.
So I can see, I believe, significant people on this screen right now. I just haven't seen anybody take the plunge to ask a question. Okay, I see two hands up now. I have, I'll go with Joe Elworthy, and then Dana and Klaus, one or both. Joe, go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Ken. Very detailed, very interesting, and a lot to absorb, and some difficult decisions, of course, as always, for council to make as they come to the appropriate decisions with all of the complexities of required in determining the appropriate amount, given that of course this is the last year of a term for council, and so they and I know council don't take that into account. they make the right decision for the future of everybody in Belcarra. And to me, it's interesting analysis. I'm not going to go into the details. Some of them were quite significantly important, i.e. water at the end of theirs would bring up 584,000 after in 2026, etc. And then I worry on two cases here, and I know you can't do it because it's minutia. Is that and you have to build your balanced budget, and I understand that, but I worry about issues that the decisions council has to make. And by the way, I apologize for bringing this up late at the last meeting under audience question. I was inappropriate, me, so please excuse me for that, Lorna. Right, but nevertheless, the water issue was one that could involve, based on the report from that committee, some significant costs, depending on where we arrive at. I don't know how you get to that, but I'll leave that to you with your wisdom there. And the other issue that bothered me, and I'm not going to bring this up now, so please, council, don't any of you turn around and say you're in conflict. I have to leave here. But the other issue is, of course, the costs associated for OPEX, for operation expenses relating to wharfage and all of that. And if we don't get to decisions on those important issues, if we don't get to decisions, and I know it's in your mandate, whatever that might be, to get to that, then we're going to be left with these things lingering. So hopefully we can get decisions on those. Hopefully you'll come to the right decision, as I'm sure you will, with your competencies that you have on council, and come up with an appropriate decision on A, B, or C for the residents of this village. So thank you for indulging me with that.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate that. Appreciate your comments, and we'll move now to Dana and/or Klaus, please.
I've just unmuted.
Perfect. Go ahead, Klaus. Thank you.
I want to thank you for the opportunity of speaking, and I want to thank Ken for the work he's put into this. And I wanted to thank Joe for his very, very interesting preamble. I wasn't really certain of what the question was at the end of that wonderful preamble, Joe. But my comments are, without further preamble, I say I read the intent and purpose of the document, and what I'm missing is exactly what the intent of providing a 5-year plan may be. And without it being given in this document, I can only conclude that I'd like answers as to why at the end of a 5-year period, we have increased our property tax rate through the magic of compounding to 50% higher than it is currently, and why we have, or what justification you can provide me with increasing our reserves from the current 2.1 to a doubling to 4.2 million at the end of 2026, period. I have additional comments which I would hold in reserve. I will ask Ken through the chair to give me some ideas as to what the philosophical intention was of this 5-year plan.
Okay, through the chair to Ken.
Yeah, the 5-year plan, of course, is required under municipal legislation. And it's a way of assessing the ramifications of present day decisions and how they affect the future. Whenever we're making decisions in the present day, we should have a longer term view of those decisions. And a 5-year period for planning is a relatively short period of time. Many communities now, particularly because of the long-term nature of infrastructure replacement and renewal, plan out at least 10 to 20 years sometimes, particularly for capital spending. And so to get a true picture of what reserve levels should be at into the future, one needs to, of course, have an asset management plan as well. And the village is working on that and making it a priority to come up with an asset management plan. And, you know, the village's reserves and surplus levels in comparison to the comparatives, of course, are relatively low. And at the end of the day, it's very likely that an asset management plan would call for the setting aside of various amounts of money over a longer term period to build up reserves. And so the intent of the increases in property taxes and user rates are to allow for that, the buildup to start to occur. And of course, when one has more muted increases in any year, one can be caught in a situation where there are larger increases are needed in any one year. So it's better to have a more consistent increase and not be caught in a situation where exorbitant increases are needed. And we do realize this, that they do have a compounding effect. And it's a case of how fast the village wants to move toward a sustainability from a financial perspective. You know, true financial sustainability will not be more closely known as again until we have a longer term view of the village's infrastructure. And also the longer sustainability picture is affected by what new facilities and infrastructure the village and its members would like to see into the future.
Thank you, Ken. Klaus, did that get to where you wanted to go?
Not exactly.
Okay.
Ken's comments that he made are understandable, but with respect to the last point he made, which is where the village is heading, and his justification of using other communities as comparisons in that regard, falls somewhat short of my understanding, because in the three communities that are compared, two of them have commercial tax bases, and I'm not certain how much of their tax revenue is collected from commercial properties, but Balcarra does not have commercial property, nor does it from the official community plan. And from the comments I've had from villagers, intend to have a commercial base. The other striking difference between ourselves and our neighbor Anmore is seeking to have a very large residential commercial project for their community. And by the same justification, Balcarra does not. And I see that using Anmore as a comparison community for financial planning seems to be somewhat weak at best. So I see very little justification for having a 50% tax increase on property tax over the 5-year period. And I have very little understanding of why, despite allowing for revenues to accumulate for major projects that you have identified, which are part of the budget, you still, at the end of 5 years, have $2.1 million in excess of all those plans. One of the shortcomings of this project is that although you can plan forward on expenses, you don't have any comment on what the property assessments would be moving forward and what that may change with respect to revenues. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Klaus. Appreciate that. Do we, so I'm looking, Lorna, I'm not seeing. I'm not seeing any, oh, Bruce Drake, go ahead.
Yes. Mhm.
Yeah, I'm just waiting, Jamie, until you're clear. I can't see the audience, so I don't know
Yeah,
if they're.
that's okay. So I guess the piece is, you know, you know, the speakers that have spoken so far, I think have done a good job of characterizing some pieces that they want council to think about. And I would just emphasize this is in particular, and council has, as a group, is willing to yield the floor, but I think it would be useful if we have people in the audience who have thoughts, whatever they may be, to express them or concerns or whatever, because council's going to need to go ahead. And the more informed we are from people, the better we will get to a good decision by council. Okay. I'm not seeing anybody in the audience looking to come forward. So Bruce, do you want to go ahead and we can go back again and then figure out where we're going from that?
Thank you very much. And
You're
Ken,
welcome.
thank you for the detailed summaries. I think Klaus raised some of the questions I have, and in part, I'd like to comment on those on the matters you had raised. I guess first on the matter of increase, you'd have to pull out the expected or anticipated inflation rate, and I appreciate that's a bit of a mug's game, but I think it wouldn't be unrealistic to assume at least 2% of those nominal increases are going to be inflation based going forward. So I guess my first question to Ken would be, would you consider that a reasonable assumption?
I would consider that reasonable, of course. I think as 2021 is showing, you can have anomalies.
Yeah,
And
well,
that's
this, yeah, I think this is a definition of an anomalous year. But I would just say to Klaus, I would do the calculations, and I don't deny their increases, and I don't deny they're significant, but we ought to pull out the inflation assumption. And I think that probably puts you more in the 26, 27, 28% nominal, or sorry, in comparable dollars increase over the 5 years. My second point has to do with the comparisons between municipalities. I think those are, as Klaus noted, there are no comparable municipalities to ourselves. And of course, those just give you a sense of what's taking place in those municipalities. And the mere comparison of a typical house value shows you how confusing those comparisons can be, because that distinction between what the provincial government specifies as the mean value of a home in Balcarra versus what in reality is the mean value once you take out the impact of wards is quite striking. I mean, it's in the neighborhood of a 40 to 50% increase in the maybe a 30% increase in the average value of a home, meaning Anmore and Balcarra homes are very similar. There is a question here, and the question is, is it fair to say, and I think you've just touched on this, Ken, and I appreciate you responding to council's wishes, but it seems to me the risk that we have faced for many years is that when we do get into serious long-term capital planning, which we are obliged to do, we are going to find that we had not been, and for many years had not been setting our tax level at one that can accommodate long-term capital planning in a responsible way, so that we're not seeing significant fluctuations year by year. Is that a fair statement?
I think a fair statement, and that's what many other communities have found as well. Just to comment on capital spending, I think, and renewal of infrastructure and assets. I think, you know, in terms of priorities, it's always a priority to take care of the infrastructure and assets you have, and to be able to afford to replace them and renew them, as opposed to having new infrastructure or new amenities.
Yes, I guess I just make the comment that my feeling has been that we are in a position where when we do complete the long-term capital plan, we are likely to face, or would have, without the increases we've done already, faced a very sobering prospect as to how much our taxes would have to increase to hold us on track to maintain our capital expenditures and our other predicted expenditures. Thus, in my mind, until we have that plan finished, we're just assuming that our costs are going to be higher than what they have been in the past. I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Bruce, and thanks, Ken, for your responses. So, Joe, I have you, and we don't have any other speakers, so we're pleased to have a second-time speaker come forward. Joe Elworthy.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Council. And it's a bit of a response to Councillor's, take this off. Sorry, a bit of a response to Councillor Drake's comments on the comparators and the decision that Council has to make. And I'm reticent to make these comments, but I'll sort of make them in any case, as I tend to in life. And you know, people, you know, look at us, they compare us, you know, whether we like it or not. They can, and not just to those municipalities, but to what's going on locally, what's going on in Port Coquitlam that's advertised, etc. And, you know, and all of the wonders that they have with taxation that's been mentioned by, you know, an audience speaker here that we don't have, and our limitations on what we do have here. But I think you have to be cognizant of the right balance of doing the right thing here. The right thing for the villagers, the right thing for everybody. And it's important that I think that's spelled out clearly, that that's the decision you're making. We don't have financial, you know, conditioning testing here. We don't have long term. We don't have pandemic or catastrophic events. We try to do the best we can within what's reasonable for everybody here, and yet have to balance budget and deal with all of the right things. So I think it's a complex one. I have to say it, and I can see why we, you know, on paper the reserve looks like, oh, we could get up a reserve, but very few people understand the asset value of what we're holding on to, particularly with water and things like that. So I just bring that up. It is, I have to say it, because you can't say it, but I can say it for you. It is somewhat of a political decision. Although it's a financial decision, it's fiduciary, it's the responsible fiduciary decision you have to make here. But those comparators, no matter how bizarre, how far off they are, people will look at them, and they look at what we're paying, and they look at the increases that you come forward with. And I think you did a good job last time in explaining that how small the quantitative impact of water and ward is compared to the overall. And I think it's all up there. So sorry for ranting. Thanks for the opportunity.
Oh, you're welcome, Joe. Appreciate your comments. So Bruce, did you want to be on again? You're welcome to be, or is the hand just up out of, okay. So I think I'm not seeing any further speakers. And I think the points that have been made by the individuals that have contributed is useful. And I think council has got some work in front of them to find the right balance. All right, so I'm going to move that. I'll look for a seconder for that the report entitled Draft 2022 to 2026 Financial Plan from the financial consultant dated November 8, 2021 be received for information. I'll look for a counselor to.
I have a second.
Okay,
Who moved that? Jamie, sorry.
Well,
Mayor?
I was just going to say that that was.
Ken, could you take down your report, please? That'd be appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, so if we have, I heard someone second, I need to hear someone move it first. So
Oh,
I'll
Counselor,
move it.
okay, I'm looking at Counselor Wilder, only she has her hand up, so she will move it. I'm looking at Counselor Clark, if that's all right, you will second it. So that motion's on the table and we've canvassed if we want to, any other counselors want to speak to that? Seeing no further. Oh, did you want to, Counselor Clark?
I was just gonna make a comment, thanking Ken for his report again, and thanking the audience for giving their feedback on this. I will think about everything I heard tonight, but I do want to say one point. The fact that we don't have a commercial or industrial tax base here makes it even more tricky, right? Because we depend on just residential tax monies. So I agree with all the comments that Ken made. I'll say it again. I said it in the past and I'll say it again. I don't make my decisions based on the graphs from what other municipalities have on their reserves. I make my decisions based on what I see here. So to me, those graphs, it's okay to have it there, but it doesn't, it's like Mayor Ross said, it's, it compares a little bit to the other municipalities, but it's not what drives at least for myself, my decisions. Thank you. And I'm really looking forward to the asset management plan. That's when we're gonna really know exactly what that balance is. Right now, we're trying to find it based on what we do know, based on how we look around and we see some roads have to be fixed. We want to do some work on the water system, so we are watching those monies very carefully. I'll say that from a perspective of a millennial. It was really hard to buy my property here. It's really hard to maintain my property here. I'm not happy. It's hard for me when I come here and talk about budget because if I wanted to do what I personally want to do, I would just lower taxes. I wouldn't raise taxes. So I just want everybody to know that I take those decisions to heart a lot. And yeah, so I'll think about it and I'll bring some more feedback next meeting. Thank you.
Okay, good. And we'll seek any comments from any other counselors. If not, counselors, members of council, we'll vote on this, and all those in favor, raise your hand and say aye. And it looks like it's unanimous, so it carries in the affirmative. I also want to thank Ken for your work on this. It is very, very detailed, and I think it certainly for me, when I read through it and then when I hear it again, I'll be going home and thinking about it and coming forward with our council team to try and find that balance. Okay, so thank you, Ken. And I would assume that you may want to slip off. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm going to do that now.
Okay, thank you for your work tonight.
Okay, see you.
Okay, take care, Ken. Thank you. And then I'm going to ask Lorna to outline the next report, if you could, please.
Yes, Your Worship. I am pleased to present the 2022 council meeting schedule, and it is required that every year a schedule be brought forward for council consideration. I do my best. Paula and I work together to try to ensure a good schedule of council meetings. And also, you will note that we do include other items such as major conferences, spring break. And you'll be pleased to see that we have tentatively scheduled Volunteer Appreciation and Valcara Day in 2022. So we're very hopeful that we will be able to go ahead with these community items too. And also you will note the municipal election in 2022 is also on this calendar. So it is put forward to council for your consideration.
Good. Thank you very much, Lorna, and to the work that you and Paula do on this. And we can look for a motion for this from council, please. Councillor Clark moving, Councillor Drake seconding.
I'll second,
and
yeah.
it's on the floor for discussion. So we'll open up with council and then we'll go to the audience to see if any members of our committee would like to comment on this. So any council members have any comments on this? Okay, well, I'll just add one quick comment. I appreciate the balance that Lorna's put forward. In particular, I understand that we're moved away from holding a meeting during spring break. I think people, given what's happened and with optimism, will potentially families look to travel, and we hope that can occur. And it's nice that they won't miss out on business. And I'm really appreciative of the optimism around looking at being able to have some events that are so treasured by our people. So we'll go out to, I've got the screen up if anybody in the audience wants to make a comment. So I'll look and not seeing anyone. So we'll come back to council and I will ask if anybody has an additional comment. If they don't, not seeing any, I'll look to call the question. So on that, the 2022 council meeting schedule and the deputy mayor schedule be approved. All those in favor?
Aye.
Up your hands, please. And I see that everyone's got their hand up, said aye, so it carries in the affirmative. And then I will go to 5.3 and ask Lorna again to outline the next report.
Yes, your worship, I was wondering if this would be a good time for a brief recess
Perfect.
before we start on this next report.
I think that would be very, very good. So, and can you or someone on council give me an indication of how much time? Is 8 minutes all right, or do you want to go for 10?
I'm good with 10 minutes if everyone
Okay.
else is.
So what I'll do is I'll start my little timer, and at 10 minutes, we'll draw everyone together. Thank you to the audience members for your support and understanding on this. So you've got 10 minutes. Thank you very much, everyone. We're recessed for 10. Hello, everybody. Looks like we're ready to resume, so we'll take just maybe 5 more seconds and then we'll move it on to, I think we're 1, 2, we've got, we'll just make sure Lisa's on again and Bruce. Perfect, good. Okay, so we've got quorum then, Lorna, so we'll go right now, if we could, to item 5.3, Lorna, and you were going to introduce it prior to the break. So go ahead, please. Thank you.
Yes, Your Worship. I am pleased to bring forward a new council procedure bylaw. And the reason that the decision was made to come forward with the new bylaw, as the previous council procedure bylaw was written in 2004 and had received 6 amendments and updates. And it became quite cumbersome to add all of the wording that we needed to add so we could include holding electronic meetings and hybrid meetings. And so, as I said, the purpose of the report is to bring forward the new council procedure bylaw that provides the option to conduct council meetings and committee meetings in person or via electronic participation. And some of the meetings in the future will be able to be hybrid meetings where people may be able to attend in the hall while other people may attend at home and still be able to participate in the council meetings. So there was work that took place in the hall using the COVID funding that we received to include the new electronic equipment. And so I would just point out a few things. And one of the items that I thought was important because of Mayor Ross's introduction at the beginning of the meeting tonight is that on page 4, under part 4, and then it's council proceedings, and then attendance at public meetings, under number 8D, it states that if a person is attending, an electronic or hybrid council meeting, the full name and video of the person must be visible if they wish to address council. So an amendment had been made to the current council procedure bylaw for the public question period that stated that the person asking the question had to be visible and have their name on the screen. But now with this wording in the new procedure bylaw, that will be required throughout the meeting as the residents are able to take part in the council meeting. So I'm not sure if there are any other parts of the council procedure bylaw that people have questions on or council. The reason I am recommending first and second reading, and again, this is a council decision, is that then at the next council meeting on November 22nd, if it receives readings tonight, that could have third reading and then adoption in December. So it would be adopted prior to the new year, but that's fine. It's however council would like to move forward.
Okay, thank you very much, Lorna. So let's do this. Let's have, we've got a motion there that council procedure bylaw number 593/2021 be read a first and second time. Let's see if we have a mover and a seconder for that. Councillor Drake moving, Councillor Clark seconding. Okay, so we'll just, it's on the floor for discussion, so we'll open up with council, please. Councillor Drake.
Yes, thank you very much. First, Lorna, thank you for doing this. I think for many people, including myself, I was impressed with the new technology that I saw when we were getting ready for Halloween, not too many days ago, in the hall. Could you just say a word or two about the potential for these hybrid events? I think it's a positive step, but I think that's probably one of the major changes we're making here.
Yes, through Mayor Ross.
Yep, thank you.
What will occur in the council meeting is, so if all of council are in attendance, or maybe only some council members would be in attendance, the ability is to move the camera around the room. So it would show the council table, it would show staff, and then you may change the camera to zoom the audience also, or move it over to where the lectern is if someone's standing at the lectern. The residents who prefer, or council who for whatever reason want to take a council meeting at home, they will be able to participate, because on the screen, it will be as it is today. It will look like a Zoom meeting. And so we would be able to interact with the residents or the council members who are at home. And so we have practiced a little bit, but trust me, the first couple of meetings there need to be a bit more practice to make sure we are able to move the camera around and to respond to people in a timely manner. But that is what the setup is capable of doing.
And if I might, as a follow-up, so you're finding the audio quality is reasonable. And part of the challenge, once you have a room full of people and then someone else trying to participate electronically, would be the potential for background noise. And I don't know how directional the microphones are, but those seem to be quite functional at the moment.
Yes, they do. Yes.
Okay.
And again, we will see how they work out, and if we need to, fix the equipment a little bit to have a better quality, we would certainly do that.
And for those who haven't seen the site, and I think I'm correct, there's a large, what is it, 60-inch screen on the wall away from the door into the main hall. So if you're sitting in the audience at an angle where you can see that screen, and I imagine almost everyone can in that room, you will be able to see the video feed from whomever is participating electronically. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Drake, and we will go. We've got one other councillor on the speaking list right now, so let's go to Councillor Snell, and then we'll check after if there's any further ones that want to speak. And then Councillor Snell, go ahead. Please.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair. Item 6, where we have the electronic and hybrid meetings. Presumably, this is driven by the state of emergency in the background. And are we currently operating in a state of emergency, or is this how we intend to move forward? Because I noticed, for instance, under 6D, that the electronic meetings require the chair, a council member, and the corporate officer in attendance at all times. So presumably a councillor would have to be in the village hall when these meetings are held to comply with that one. And of course, one could have a situation where one of those people declares a conflict of interest and has to leave the meeting. And so I just wonder how that would be, because we're not in accordance with that right now. Another question I had was okay, you talk a little bit about connectivity when somebody loses connectivity, and that has happened quite frequently. And we've had a number of councillors that in fact have had to respond through a phone, and we've lost picture, which again goes against one of the other items on the list there. And I wonder if any thought had been given to the visual backgrounds when people are in fact speaking. We don't, head and shoulders are fine. Simply that, head and shoulders are fine. Beautiful scenes up the Indian Arm are fine, and stuff like that. But I think that we have seen on occasions there have been other things that can be. The backgrounds have been very very distractive, and I think that should be addressed. Just as we've asked for people to show themselves, then we would like to have some control over the background. That would be my questions, or the questions. Thank you.
So, Councillor Snell, can we just maybe go through your question through me to the chair, to our Chief Administrative Officer?
Yep,
And
by all
just
means.
and see if we can get an initial answer to any of those?
By all means.
Okay. So you had, I think, but Lorna, you would have heard, do you want to answer? I think there were a couple questions and we can get John to rephrase them if we don't have it. One was around, I think, 6D and whether this was meant in a state of emergency and what it would look like going forward. John, does that make sense for?
That through the chair, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Well, we are currently dealing with COVID situation, I guess, if that's what you call the state of emergency, just because of the size of the village hall and the amount of people that we're able to have situated in the hall. But if there was a conflict of interest and someone would have to leave, then the procedure bylaw follows and the community charter for who the deputy mayor is who would assume the chair. And the other people would still be in the hall. Because in a council meeting before COVID, if a council member had a conflict of interest, they physically left the hall for that conflict of interest.
So okay, and through the chair, would that mean that there's some anticipation that all the councillors would in fact be in the village hall?
No, I don't think so. You're
Oh,
through.
okay, all right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, John, for your questions. And Councillor Drake, I'm looking around, I'm not seeing any others from council. So why don't we go back to you, Councillor Drake, and then let's go out to the members of the audience so we can kind of go back and forth. Oh,
Your
Councillor
Worship,
Clark.
I'm sorry. Councillor Snell also had a question about losing connectivity.
Yes. Yeah.
And so if you're okay, I will try
Yeah.
to
Why don't you
respond
go
to
ahead
that.
and do that right now? Thank you.
Sure. As you are aware, that happened in the last council meeting when we lost power and we went on generator here in the hall, but there were council members that had a difficult time getting back on, but they did. And I think some residents may have had difficulty too, but that would just proceed the same way as if we were in the hall and somebody, lost connectivity. We try to wait to see if they can come back in. If we can maintain quorum, the meeting would continue. And if not, we would follow the procedure to set a time for when the council meeting would continue.
Okay, good. Thank you on that, Lorna. I appreciate that. Councillor Drake and then Councillor Clark, if it's okay with you, I'm going to go from Councillor Drake to, it looks like Sherry, and then to Deborah, and then I'll come back to you if that's all right, just so I know that mixes up the order, but you came on a little bit after I said we'd go to, so
No problem.
Okay, good, thank you. Councillor Drake, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I'll wait until you've heard from the public and
Okay.
and Councillor Clark's had an opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Okay, good. So we'll go to, I've got you next on the list. I've got Jim Chisholm, but it looks like you're there, Sherry. So
Yeah, that's
welcome.
me.
Go ahead, thank you.
Can you give me an approximate cost of this system?
Yeah, let me go to the Chief Administrative Officer, and I believe she can give you an amount. And I think we may have heard it in a meeting already, but Lorna, please.
Yes, Your Worship, I am trying to recall what the full amount was. It was, I'm thinking around $4,000 to $5,000, and it came out of our COVID grant funding.
And that was 100% grant.
Yes.
Okay. The other question is, this needs an added employee to operate it?
Through
Yeah, go ahead.
to Sherry, we're not sure, Sherry. We're doing our best to, the way it's set up now, we think we would be able to manage it between Paula and myself. And we're hopeful that'll happen, but we just have to work it out and see how complex it is once we get.
Yeah, because I gather from tonight that there would be a matter of swinging a camera around to face the speaker and things like that. So yeah, that, you know, could be very interesting. Mm-hmm. And once again, really add to the cost. Thank you for your answers.
Okay. And maybe what we could do, that was, I appreciate your answer, Lorna. If we can maybe for the next meeting, come back with the specificity. I don't think we need it now, and then Sherry's not asking, but we can just firm that up. And,
sure. I'll do
and we'll go to Deborah. Welcome.
Hi there.
Hello?
Oh, there. Hi. And I have seen Pitt Meadows has sort of the same thing. So it can work, and it works wonderfully. Just a question for clarification through the chair to Lorna, I guess. You said something about cameras need to be on. So with the gallery or people, do our cameras need to be on the whole time? Because I find that a distraction. I've gotten to where I'll turn off my camera unless I'm speaking. So is that okay that the cameras can be off unless you're speaking? Or does the bylaw state that the cameras must remain on?
Through the chair to Deborah, that is for when you're speaking. Then we would like your camera on and your name on your screen.
Perfect, that makes sense. Thank you.
Thanks.
And we may even, as you look to get in the order, as I think you did tonight, but I'm not 100% sure, but you would, as you look to get in the speaking order, you would put your screen on, and that would suffice.
Good.
Okay, but it would be helpful as we move forward, right?
Right.
Okay. Councillor Clark, oh, sorry, Deborah, are you finished? Okay, good, thank you. Councillor Clark, go ahead, please. And then we'll
Thank you,
go to
Mayor
Councillor
Ross.
Gray.
Yeah, so to yeah, I just have a couple of comments. Sherry Chisholm touched on one of the comments I was going to make. At that time, consideration of an additional staff member to assist with the use of electronic equipment will be determined. I hope I hope we can manage to do with what we have there. I really do, because I also wouldn't like to see the cost added, but yeah, so I'll leave it at that. It says here under section 6, item E, council members attending an electronic or hybrid meeting must at all times be visible on the camera. Is there a time limit for this? Because for myself, for instance, many times I'm here by myself and I have to let dogs out. I have guest dogs. Obviously, it's part of my full-time job. I have to let the dog out or something's going on with the dogs. So if I turn off my camera, would it be considered that I left the meeting for that time? I usually turn it off because I'm walking around while I'm listening to the meeting, if I have to deal with the dogs or whatever, or if I have a bad connection. So to John Snell's comments, what does that mean when it comes to writing the minutes if a council member, for some reason, cannot have their camera on for a few minutes?
The box. that's in the dining room on the chair.
Oh, Sherry, you're not muted.
Sherry.
Excuse me. I'm not sure who's speaking, but I
Sherry.
understand that's a question through Councillor Clark, and it will go to our Chief Administrative Officer. So thank you for your support on that.
Yes, thank you, Caroline, Councillor Clark. Yes, when you're not on camera, I consider that you're not in the meeting. Now, if you just turn your camera off for a minute and there wasn't a motion moved or seconded or passed during that time, then it's not really an important matter for the minutes. But it's just you absolutely must have your screen on during a motion, because that way we need to know that you're in attendance.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that makes, through the chair to Lorna. Thank you, Lorna. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it's just because it gets, doing meetings from home, you get a few distractions, being animals or kids or whatever. So I was a bit worried about that. My last comment is, I usually don't like doing first, second reading in one meeting, especially for new bylaws. But given the fact that we had to update the existing bylaw we have right now so many times, and also, I understand that we would have that passed if we take the motion right now as it is, we would have that passed in December. So it would be another 2 meetings before we adopt that, right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, so at this time, I think, I'm okay with doing 2 readings in one night. I don't know how the rest of council feels, but I'm okay with that. Thank you. It's it makes sense to me. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. And I'm going to just the list here. I'm going to go to Councillor Drake, and then I'm going to go back out to the audience to Joe Elworthy. And thank you, people, for your contribution so far.
Thank you. Through the chair, again to Lorna, the under minutes of committee meetings. So that is item 31 on our list. It just lays out what I imagine are standard requirements with respect to minutes of a committee meeting. One thing that has changed for us with the introduction of Zoom, and I imagine will continue going forward if we have hybrid meetings, is the recording of council meetings and in committee meetings indeed, and their availability to the public. I'm just wondering if we are obligated to have a printed copy of minutes if we have a digital record of virtually everything that was said at the meeting. And I'm not asking for an answer tonight. I'm just saying I don't think anyone would be ill-served if they wanted to know something about a specific meeting and we could just point them to 45 minutes into this recording, which is available on our website, and they can see exactly what the exchange was. So I just flagged that as something perhaps we could have a look at it. I imagine the legislation hasn't advanced to the point that there's flexibility on that, but it strikes me as maybe no longer required to have printed copies of this sort of thing if we have an alternative available that's as reliable. In fact, probably more detailed in terms of its reliability. That's it. Thank you.
Bruce, you're not looking for an answer on that tonight. You're looking to give Lorna some notice and she'll come back to the next meeting.
Unless Lorna happens to have looked it up already. I imagine it would not be practical. I just want to have it resolved before we adopt. So by our December meeting, I'd like to know. And I'm anticipating that we won't have flexibility on it. It just seems to me, speaking of using up staff time, that producing minutes for a committee meeting where we have it on video is not necessarily the best use of our staff time. Thank you.
Lorna, did you want to take that on notice?
Sure, I will take that on notice, Your Worship.
Okay,
yes.
good.
But I do believe that for our permanent records, and minutes are permanent records of the municipality, so they're kept forever, that we do need to have signed copies of minutes on file. But I will look into that and confirm it for the next council meeting.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Drake. And we'll move to Joe Elworthy. Joe, go ahead, please. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Ross, and of course, welcome to the reality of post-pandemic technology and the complete acceptance of privacy issues that we would never have agreed to prior to all of what we've experienced. So a lot of things are going on out there. I'm pretty sure council will have to deal with this play by play as it goes along, as every organization is. It's a development, it's a huge technological development that's taking place in many organizations, hybrid, Zooming, etc. Myself, I sadly miss seeing, feeling, and touching people, but however, I'm stuck with this as most of us are. And I would just say that the recordings issue, could be an issue going forward. Could be an issue. There's you know, whatever you say, it's out there and it's on out there. Councillor Snell brought up background. It wasn't addressed, but background, you know, as you know, putting on your backgrounds. I don't fancy to myself. What you see is what you get. But, you know, I think there are kind of things you get to. Anyways, I want to congratulate you for moving in this direction. I think we're going to get more participation. We're going to get more community participation. And I think you'll work it out as we go through it. So good move. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much, Joe. So I'm looking at the screen right now, and I'm not seeing anybody else on wishing to speak. So unless I'm missing someone, I'm going to come back to council. We have a motion on the floor. But I just want to check with council, do this because we are looking to do the 2 readings. Do you want, council, do you want to ask any more questions? Do you want to get any more answers before we do that? No, I'm not seeing that. So I will, we've got, Paula, you've got the 2 people, the movers and the seconders?
Yes, we do, your worship.
Okay.
Thanks.
And that, so the motion is that council procedure bylaw number 593/2021 be read a first and second time. So I'll look to call the question on that. All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Okay, and I note that it carries in the affirmative and it's unanimous. And we will move to Lorna to outline the next report. You're busy tonight. Thank you, Lorna.
Thank you, your worship. Yes, I was asked to bring forward an update on the Midden Road closure. And so I just wanted to provide some background as to how that happened. And on May 13th, 2019, Council passed a motion to provide for a temporary closure of Midden Road at Bedwell Bay Road. And the temporary closure was to remain in place until October 1st, 2019. And staff were to direct Translink and all emergency services and residents about this change. And then following the Midden Road closure, the Translink bus stop was moved a little way down the road. And then at a regular council meeting on June 24th, 2019, council approved the installation of 18 meters of new standard roadside barriers at a cost of $3,500 for the closure to traffic on Midden Road at Bedwell Bay Road. And it was noted that in the budget in 2019, there was $60,000 set aside for repair to Midden Road, and that did not occur. And I would just note too that Midden Road is not part of the MRN road network, that we do receive funding from Translink for MRN roads. And that just provides council with a summary of the Midden Road closure at this point in time.
Okay. Thank you very much, Lorna, for that information. I think it places things in context. So we have just to start things off, we have a motion here that the report dated November 8, 2021 regarding the update on the Midden Road closure be received for information. So if we have a mover and seconder.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Councillor Wilder moving, Councillor Clark seconding. So it's on the floor for discussion. And it's a motion for receipt here to be received. Any of the councillors want to speak to this? Councillor Clark, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mayor Ross. Just to note here, when that motion was passed back in May 13th of 2019, I was not present at that meeting. So I was away, so I couldn't participate. So I'm gonna give my feedback now, if I may, on the closure of Mitten Road. It's I probably wouldn't have agreed to close Mitten Road and back then, and honestly, I would like to see that back open. I do believe one of the main roles of local government is to deliver decent roads, right? So that's one of our main responsibilities. It's one of our basic responsibilities. I do believe we should fix that road. When I think about Mitten Road, opening the Mitten Road, I envision a one-way road only. The way it is right now, to me, it's it doesn't look good. I don't think it fixed any problems in my view. When it comes to traffic, you ended up now with a situation that if people drive in, they're gonna have to come back and drive out instead of driving in as it used to be, and then taking the turn and leading them out. So they're just driving that road twice now, rather than just once and getting out of the road. I do think we need to fix that road, and I think we need to open that road. So I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Clark. Any other members of council right now that would like to speak? Okay, I'm not.
Oh, I will.
Oh, Councillor Wilder, go ahead, please.
I think it's time that this needs to be brought back to discuss what's going to happen. It's been 2 years. A temporary closure is not 2 years. And it has been. I think it's gone on far too long, and it needs to be brought back to decide what's going to happen with that. So that's just my comment.
Okay, good. Thank you very much, Councillor Wilder. And I'm just going to canvass if I ever have anyone else from council looking to speak. I'll add myself to the list, but I'll add myself after we've heard some members of the community. Deborah Struck, go ahead, please. Welcome.
Hello again. It definitely has its drawback being closed, and everybody that goes down has to come back. And I think that if it were to be opened, it should just be one way, and the flow of traffic, it would make sense. So because we've got parking there for residents from the other part of Belcarra to come if they want to come to the park, I guess coming from the other end of Midden towards us, open in that direction. And then also if I don't know, would that mean that Translink automatically would get to move the bus route being back that way or not? But I'm for having it opened as long as it's one way. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Deborah. And I've got Bruce and then Caroline, and I'm going to add myself to the list.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, again, follow up to Deborah's comments, actually. So I'm taking it from Deborah, and I'll ask her to correct me if I'm wrong. So you're supportive, but you'd like to see it as one way. And I take it that one way is that you can come to the three-way stop, drive down past your home in Peters, and then make a left turn and drive back up to Bedwell Bay Road, so that it's I guess it's counterclockwise if you're looking down from on high.
Probably either way. I think coming into Belcarra on the other end, and going out would make a bit more sense, but either way, I think if people were coming from, say, Maine and coming to the park and they had to go around the circle and then down and then out
Yeah.
that way, whatever works, but I would just prefer them coming from the midden at Bedwell Bay, coming in that way rather than coming from Belcarra and Bedwell Bay Road down. But that might be something I think worthwhile for council to be able to talk to residents and find out. I'm only one voice.
Yeah. You've spoken. Okay, it just seems to, no matter what you do, people are going to end up driving the full route if it's a one-way connection, right? They either, after they visited the park, they drive out past your place, or when they're going in, they drive past your place and then leave without having to come back. Anyway, that's great. That's my question. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Drake and Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mayor Ross. Yeah, I think it would make more sense to do from the three-way stop going left and then out. And that would also solve some problems, because what I see going on now there is that residents that lives in front of the park, they've been blocking their driveways so people won't turn around on their driveways. So that would solve that problem too. And yeah, and we would have a nice turnaround. So I don't see why not. As I said, I think it should be one way. I think we should open. I think we should fix it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Clark. And I've added my name to the list. And I wasn't here when this happened, and I've got to say, I appreciate getting that report tonight because it puts it in some context for me. But I just think on every measure, we should be looking to open this road, that we have, that road in itself is an asset, and for whatever reason, it sat and it hasn't been repaired. And I don't believe we have the luxury. One of the fundamental things we need to do is to fix roads and fix them on a regular basis, so those get done. They don't ebb away. And I worry that when people talk about what happens right now, during the election, I talked to someone at the end who was very, very frustrated, people coming and turning around, and there was an estimate of how many cars per day in the summer. So, and I guess the other piece is, from time to time, you see in our village, you see people, and Councillor Snell spoke about this at election time in writing, about people having motorhomes and boats and other things and wanting to be able to turn around. And there are times when I'm walking along the road and I look to see what's happening and I shudder, because I just think we're placing people in no-win situations. But here's the final one for me, and I'm really appreciative people have come in and spoken, and I think we as a council need to decide if we're going to take action, what the process will be. But I think there is a piece that is just absolutely speaks in favor of us doing that. And that is, we have our firefighters who do tremendous work for us. And if a fire truck is down there and then needs to go somewhere else, it does not make any sense to the people they're responding to or the work that they're doing, that for a reason I don't understand, and I'm not big in going back in history, but we need to move forward and we need to fix that road and we need to maintain it. We've got water assets underneath it. And most importantly, we need to make sure our fire department is not having to do however many point turn. And I don't think I'm speaking apart from anybody, but so I'll conclude my comments now. And I appreciate people that are coming on and giving some feedback, and it's very helpful. So I'll take my hand down. And I'm looking at the screen and seeing if anybody either from council or Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mayor Ross.
Go ahead.
So my question goes to our council members, I guess. So how do we deal with that? Can we make a motion today? Or how can we deal with that? Because I don't think we should be waiting another 3 months, you know, to get that decision on there.
So let's go take that question through to Lorna about, I have some thoughts, but there's the potential. Lorna, do you want to talk about how this council, we have a motion on the floor right now. And how could we look at doing different things on this?
Well, your worship, I believe it would be worthwhile for council to provide their comments perhaps to you and myself, and that I could prepare a report for the next council meeting. So we could determine more about what you discussed tonight, what, if it would be one way, what the direction would be, and then just bring back a report with a good motion in it that might suit council.
And I think that allows too, that people have heard tonight and responded to something, and it was a motion to receive. So if we're gonna switch gears, it may make sense to, that report would then let people know about potentially what council's going to do. They could come and influence, and then council could make a decision. So Councillor Clark, back to you. Thank you for the lead.
Thank you. No, so I think that makes a lot of sense. I think on a report will be best. If we can get this done in the next couple of meetings, that would be even better. And I just one quick comment. That's one of the reasons why taxes go up here. We need to fix the roads. We need to maintain the roads drivable. Nobody expects, well, at least I don't expect to drive on brand new roads all the time in Belcarra. We're a small community. When I drive around Alberta in small communities, and I drive around BC in small communities, they're not all perfect, but they also don't have a bunch of holes. So, you know, so I think that's, it's time. Again, that's one of the reasons why your taxes go up, right? So we got to make sure we deliver the basics right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Clark. And I'm going to go to, it looks like Sherry, welcome.
Hi there. You know, I don't have any big complaint with the road being opened, and I'm probably more affected than anybody because it's me I'm the big turnaround. But you know, I don't think you're going to be able to police it to being a one-way. So why not you open it the way it was before? Just either way traffic and have it open. Rather than complicate it with a one-way. That's my thought.
Okay, and you know, Sherry, I want to thank you for that. I think that's a good piece to go in the mix and to consider it. I mean, we've heard that one way will do some things, and you've given us some good food for thought. So thank you.
Thanks.
I'm going to go to Councillor Clark.
Sorry.
That's okay.
If I may. Just a quick comment on Sherry's point, and I had this on my notes, but I didn't say it. The reason why I'm suggesting one way is because that would be, in my opinion, safer for the pedestrians. So when you're crossing from the park back and forth, which we have a lot there, coming and going from the bus, it's much easier to, you know, when there's so much traffic on the weekends that are sunny, it's much easier for you to be looking to one side, worrying about the one side coming cars, rather than both. So it's safer for people that are walking dogs. It's safer for people that have kids running around on that road, coming from the playground out. I've seen that many times while I'm walking my dogs there. So I think it's just safer for the pedestrians. That's why I'm suggesting one way. Thank you.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. And I appreciate everybody's contributions on that. And I'm not seeing any further speakers. So I'm going to go back to council, and we have a motion on the floor. It's been moved and seconded, correct, Paula? Yes. And the motion is that the report dated November 8, 2021 regarding the update on the Midden Road closure be received for information. And we've also given staff some requests to do some things, and that's going to happen. But I will look to call the question on that motion. All in favor, please raise your hand, say
Aye.
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 And I'm noting that it carries in the affirmative and it's unanimous.
Thank
So
you.
thank you very much for that. And Lorna, thanks for your good suggestions, and a special thank you to all members of our community who I think really gave us some good ideas tonight, and we'll look forward to future discussion. And I'm going to ask Stuart to outline the next report, which is 5.5, if I could please. Stuart.
Thank you, Your Worship. Staff recommend that the report dated November 8th, 2021 regarding invasive plant management from the Invasive Species Council of Metro Vancouver be received for information. As part of the effort to control and eradicate invasive vegetation in the village, staff contracts the Invasive Species Council of Metro Vancouver to monitor and control in Belcarra. The company conducted 2 treatment and monitoring sessions. The first treatment was conducted on July 15th, and the second one was in August 31st. The herbicide used for the control works was VP 480, which is a non-selective herbicide. The target weed was knotweed. Most of it was found along Marine Avenue, and the company noted that there was an increase in knotweed sites compared to last year. The report indicates that there are now 22 monitoring sites this year as opposed to 18 last year, and also a larger treatment area of 120 square meters in 2021 versus 82 square meters in 2020. Staff plans to bring back the company earlier in 2022 to conduct a full inventory, investigation, and follow-up report that shows the status of all this invasive species in Belcarra. So we look forward to having them come back and reviewing the report that they give at that time. That's it, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you very much. And so we have we've got a motion here that the report dated November 8, 2021 regarding the invasive plant management 2021 from the Invasive Species Councils of Metro Vancouver be received for information. So I'll look for, thank you, Councillor Clark.
Second that.
I'm going to go with Councillor Snell. He beat you on the hand, but good job. We're moving. So it's on the floor for discussion. Anybody on council would like to add to that? Not seeing anything, we'll go out to the audience, and I'm looking and I'm not seeing anybody on that. So I'm going to go ahead back to council, and I'm going to look to call the question. All those in favor of the motion as written,
Aye.
hands up, and I note that the affirmative carry and it's unanimous. Okay, so thank you very much. And we're now at the mayor's report. And so I have a couple items on there, and number one is the Zero Waste Conference that I went to that Metro had sponsored, and I've got to say it was a very, very good conference. It was a nice mix of both guest speakers and futurists who commented on what the world would look like and the steps we need to take. And I think it was a good conference, but I think it also showed small actions, medium actions, and large actions. But it also, I think, painted a picture that we're going to have some things that will come about in Belcarra in terms of the circular economy and looking at reducing our carbon, looking at having things being reused. So it's directly connected to our recycling site. So I just wanted to talk about that. I must say I've never had a more entertaining 8.5-hour day in a long time, especially on Zoom. So the next one is I wanted to just talk about the Home Builders Association Municipal Dinner. I ended up going, and I just wanted to also say that Councillor Wilder joined me, and we were able to carpool out there, and it was they ended up sitting us at different tables, but I found it fascinating because we were with a group that is involved in the Home Builders Association in every part of the process. And I was with someone who had worked for sitting right next to me, was someone who had worked for a very, very large building company in British Columbia. If I shared the name, you'd be very familiar. They're do a lot of work, and he left and set up his own business, and he started it in 2007. So he hit 2008 and all the financial pieces. But it struck me that since then, he's been involved in a number of municipalities and has built things, more dense, but things that are very attractive for different groups of people, like townhomes and different things, and duplexes in particular. And I just found it an interesting piece on that. And at some point, I always think about that diversity of housing and our challenges long-term about being able to make sure we have future members of our volunteer fire department. And I know something that we share that, and we have some challenges. So I don't know the answer for that, but it's interesting to think about it. And I will say that going up on the website, and Paula does a great job on this, the Home Builders Association has a kids campaign on Wednesday, November 3rd in support of the Lower Mainland, and they're launching it, and they look at having families that need jackets to be able to be dropped off. So if anybody has an interest in that, that information will be on the website. And then my third and final item is just to note that coming up is Remembrance Day. And I also wanted to acknowledge that today is Indigenous Veterans Day. And so it is the time we honor Indigenous people who contributed in both the war and peacekeeping for our people. And I want to give a special thank you to the Port Moody Power and Sales Squadron, who will be holding a virtual Remembrance Day this year, similar to last year. And the ceremony will begin promptly at 10:30, and the link to the ceremony will be posted on the village website. And they've been a long time group that has faithfully delivered that service. And when it is in person, it is an amazing, just lovely, lovely service. And they have asked and requested if we could support them in online. And so that link will be on the village website. Paula will have it up tomorrow, and you'll be able to move in on that. And I want to acknowledge all the people that have been involved in the past, and we will look forward, and we're confident that there will be a time in the future that we can go back and viewing it in person and seeing the most incredible Remembrance Day ceremony that happens on the water and is delivered by our friends in the Port Moody Power and Sales Squadron. So thank you on that. If there's any questions on the mayor's report, I'd be pleased to take them. And then Joe, did you have a question to me on the mayor's report, or?
Thank you, Mayor Ross. A comment more so on your zero waste conference, right? And
yes,
of course, climate change is all high on the agenda everywhere. So important. And I'm wondering if at some point in the future that perhaps council should not be considering a net zero policy as an indicative of where this village is going with regards to climate management and our support for that concept.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely a thing that, I mean, one of the challenges I noticed, and we have a tremendous council, but people have different workday responsibilities and things, but going forward, your view of what we need to do, I share that too. But in addition, I believe that the province is going to come out with a new plan that will obligate us to do some things. And what will stand us in good stead is that we've got a good base, but we're going to have further things we need to do. So thank you, Joe, for that.
Thank you.
I agree with you 100%. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mayor Ross. If I may touch on one thing, I had a few phone calls from a few residents,
Sure.
from a couple of residents throughout the week, asking why Power Squadron event, the ceremony, would be held virtually again this year. I contacted Parks and asked them if they knew anything about it, but they said that apparently they had issued a permit for the Power Squadron for their event, but they decided, but the Power Squadron decided to do it online this year. So I just wanted to clarify that, because I also saw some comments on different Facebook pages about it. Okay, so it wasn't Parks that canceled. To my knowledge, when I contact Parks, they said it was Port Moody Squadron that decided to cancel. Thank you.
So we certainly got an early communication from the Port Moody Squadron. And I guess I always approach these, that people that are volunteering to do things, particularly at this time, and we know that a number of things, we are still in a COVID period, a number of things go with that. So your relationship to age has an effect on outcomes. If you are unvaccinated or someone in the proximity is unvaccinated, the number I believe is 50 times age adjusted. So I believe this, that we're seeing different people take different incremental steps to move forward. And I just believe that when you've got a volunteer group, and I don't want to talk about age, but I see each year the same people are doing tremendous work. And I always honor the fact if someone wants to do it in a different way. So.
Oh, absolutely. Just to make it clear, I wasn't pointing fingers on
Yeah.
anybody. I was just giving that information, putting that information out there. I'm more, yeah, it's up to them. Like, it's not up to me or anybody else. But yeah, no, I'm glad that they're holding that they are holding virtually. If it was virtually on in person, again, is their decision. And yeah, no, I think it's great. I'll be there online watching, because I think it's always beautiful. So I'm so thankful for them. And I have to say, because that's not the only thing they do around the village. They are the ones too that do the Christmas thing on the village with Santa and everything. So I think that's they do such an amazing job. I have a lot of respect for them. So yeah, it's great. I'm looking forward to it.
And thank you for bringing that up, because I do think they're relying on us to be virtual partners. Yeah. Okay. So do we have anybody else? Thank you, Councillor Clark. Do we have anybody else that would like to make a report or share anything from a committee? Okay. If not, I'm going to ask Councillor Drake to outline the next report, which is 6.2, to locate you, the Water Committee recommendations.
Great,
Councillor
thank
Drake.
you. Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Council has the rather lengthy document in front of them. I'd like to thank Lorna for her help putting this into a coherent fashion. I think it was, it's quite detailed, and it's detailed because there are a lot of recommendations involved. I would like to ask that we consider the recommendations in reverse order to what they're printed, because I'd like to resolve the issue that council is prepared to move on the recommendations before we move the second recommendation that thanks the Water Committee and wraps up its work with council's agreement. So I would like to move the recommendation on the understanding that we'll deal first with recommendation B, and I'll wait for a seconder on that.
Okay, so we've got Councillor Drake moving it. Councillor Clark, thank you for seconding it.
Yeah.
And that's on recommendation B right now, correct?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if
Okay.
I
So it's
may
now
go
the
on and
floor.
say, yeah, sorry.
No, go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. So this is there's a lengthy series. In fact, I suspect we're setting a record for the village in the number of motions that are combined here. There's one technical point, I would say that on the list council has, the very last one shown as number 32. And for anyone who's following, the bracketed material simply refers to the report, the last report, technical report 2, provided by the chair of the water committee. So that's just a reference point. But item 32, that is, there is obviously no action related to that. So I just like to suggest that when we move these, that we're dealing up to number 31. That 32 is simply not an action. It simply refers you back to other points where the issue of sprinklers are addressed in the report. So the all of the others are steps that are recommended by the water committee, either within the technical report 2, which is the vast majority of these. 1 or 2 were recommended elsewhere. And this list, as you will see from the description and the recommendations, if council approves it, will change over time as we resolve and deal with some of the questions that are there. There may be a few points added, but gradually some of these steps will be completed and they'll come off this the list. At least they'll come off of the ones that remain to be addressed. So that's it. I'm happy to answer any questions. It's quite a detailed list, but it really summarizes an enormous amount of work that the water committee has done.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Drake. So why don't we, at this point, Bruce will open it up to council first for any questions.
Certainly.
And then if, once that's concluded, then we will go up to the community members. And then we'll come back to you and to council. All right. Sounds good, Bruce?
Absolutely.
Drake. Okay. All right. So I'm looking for anybody on council that has a question right now. I see Councillor Clark. Please go ahead.
Me again. Okay, so all right, so I have a few questions. First, obviously, thank you to Councillor Drake and obviously to the water committee and all staff that's been working so diligent, so hard on this. So, but I do have a few questions. So the first question to the chair, I guess it would be to Lorna. What have staff asked the engineers to give the answers to at this point? And I'm talking about the WSP engineering group, because when I watched the last water committee meeting, I understand there were some questions that were asked, and when we asked last meeting, my understanding is that Lorna said to us that there is a report coming from the WSP. So I would like to know, prior to these motions being brought for today to council to vote on, what have you asked the engineers to give the answers to so far? Thank you. That's the first question. And through the chair, that would be to Lorna.
Okay, so Lorna, through the chair, please.
Sorry, I was muted. Yes, through the chair. Your worship, I don't have a list of everything that we have asked WSP to report back on, but there is a list of items that have been asked and that did come out of the water committee, certainly. I would be able to provide that to council, but I don't have the list right now.
Okay.
But they are working on a few items for us.
Okay.
Okay, so follow up on this question, if I may. So my understanding from last meeting is that there was a report coming to council from WSP on the questions that already have been asked. Is that the case still, or it's going to be all compressed in one report?
There could be more than one report. I'm not sure at this point right now.
Okay. The second is okay. So my second, it's not really a question. It's more as a suggestion. I think I would like to see a deadline on this project to be accomplished, and even if something happens and for some reason we missed the deadline, it would at least give us an idea of when we're going to hear back from the engineers and from all the different motions. You know, it could be a, you know, I don't know, deadline by February. And if something happens, then, you know, before that, obviously it would come to council. But I think it would be good to have some sort of deadline on the items that we're asking. Also, my second comment is that there's one question that I've heard many times throughout the last 2 years here, is that if staff was recording how much water it's I don't know how to say it properly, but how much water we're dumping, right, to keep the chlorination levels at a reasonable rate. But I didn't see a motion that covers that part. So I think we should have that there as well. In my opinion, I think we should know how much we're dumping and have it as part of the manual or as part of the maintenance of the system, to always know how much water you're dumping. And I have another question, is that when can we
I'm gonna
sorry.
just ask right here if you could complete this question, and then let's go then to Bruce. Okay.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Because I think we also, I think there's been a partial answer, but you've asked some questions. We haven't had some answers. So I don't want to get too far ahead. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So but go ahead. You've got a question to ask right now, correct?
Yeah, well, I'll go by parts. So, you know, the first was a suggestion for a deadline for project completion. And the second is if we're considering recording how much water it's being dumped. It's being flushed. Yeah.
So, Lorna, do you want to respond to the deadline question and the dumping piece, if you can?
Yes, Your Worship. I have asked WSP when they would have a report back to us. And I believe we'll have a report answering some of our questions by December, certainly. But I wasn't sure if Councillor Clark was referring to all of the motions in Councillor Drake's report by February. If you could have, I'm not sure.
Yeah, so let me go back just so we can clarify that. Councillor Clark, please.
Yes, to the chair, to Lorna. Yes, I'm suggesting a deadline for all of the motions in front of us tonight.
Okay, so let me. Okay, so that's extra from what's in this report that's come forward, correct? Because Councillor Drake, I was just going to say, I think it's useful for us to maybe hear from Councillor Drake on this. Is that all right? Because I think
it's a must.
Well, I think there's a piece here for how we're going to get through, but I'm not sure if a deadline that's been added on to a structure that already exists in this report. But go ahead, Councillor Drake.
Yeah, if I might, through the chair. First, the issue of deadlines is dealt with on item 3. It's the third of the 31 resolutions here. So it asked that staff come back on a regular basis, and we specify in the first meeting of each month, and that they deal with the status of these issues and provide anticipated completion dates. Some of these are reasonably complex, and some of the recommendations are reasonably vague, such as, I would point you to number 3.0. Consider the recommendations of the tree committee related to fire risk reduction. I mean, that's not a single item resolution, and you could arguably resolve it by considering the recommendations and deciding to do absolutely nothing about them. That would complete that resolution. It's not what we're looking for, and it's not what I trust we're going to do. But I just mentioned putting a blanket deadline on this. Well, obviously we want to look at them regularly and make progress through them on a steady basis. I believe that the very process of documenting them and then having a monthly report on this so we can see where they're sitting and what the anticipated completion date is should move us forward in that direction. Item 1. The second point, sorry, I may have lost it here. It was
Dumping, I believe, Councillor Drake was the question.
the very first one that Caroline asked or Councillor Clark asked.
I think she asked about a deadline, and then
Deadlines.
she also asked about dumping.
Oh,
If
dumping,
we-
yeah.
Yes,
And if I'm not mistaken, that is also dealt with. I'm just trying to go through these. It
Yeah.
was a recommendation with respect to metering. And if you're going to do a report on metering and compare the impact of the assessment of what you've measured when you read the meters versus what we've taken in from North Vancouver, and just to remind people, there is a discrepancy between those measures, but let us assume we actually have an
Yes.
accurate measurement as to what's coming in. Then if the sum of all the usage over that period of time falls short, you either explain it presumably by having dumped that much or by having had that much leak out of the system or some combination of the two. So I'm just saying that issue as to how much we're dumping is probably a subset of the metering recommendation. I was just glancing through it while you were speaking, Councillor Clark, and I guess it's number 21. Report the apparent discrepancies between the metering. And then should there be a discrepancy, the next one, suggest cost-estimated solutions. That's not exactly what I'm looking for. I guess all I am saying is that I believe these recommendations the committee gave us are pretty comprehensive. I'm looking for the one on metering. It's got to be.
It's a 15.5A. That village-wide meters reading be used to provide a report to council estimating domestic consumptions and comparing the consumption to measured inflow. Is that the one?
Yeah, a subset of that should answer your second question. How much spillage? Well, all you're going to know is here's what we know about the inflow. Here's what we've measured. And the discrepancy is such and such, and whatever that discrepancy is, obviously you have to speculate as to what's happening. We don't have a hard measure at the moment how much we're dumping, but I'm sure once we get that first report, council may wish to add more, may seek more information at that point. But I guess I'm just saying, I think that should be something that would flow out of that report. No pun intended.
So, okay, yeah, I just want to make sure we cover that. So,
Yeah.
So if you're saying that this will do it, then that's good. But yeah, I think we should have that recorded. As Councillor Drake mentioned, I did see the provision that you were saying on item 3, that the motions be approved and retained, but it's not really what I'm saying. It's more of a deadline. But I understand your answer, and I think that makes a lot of sense.
It will come.
Yeah.
I would just add, as these issues come back monthly for review, and as we work our way through them, and as we complete them and narrow down the number that are remaining, if there is an uncertainty or an issue a council member wishes to add, that's a simple resolution, right, to add to our list. I guess I'm conscious with this. I have grandchildren who like to pile blocks up to a ridiculously high level and then roll something in to destroy the structure. I'm conscious of this collection being quite a complex set of recommendations, and I would just as soon move them and then deal individually with add-ons later on. I'm just worried if we try to make a change here, it could get very convoluted.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. That's it for me. Thank you.
thank you, Councillor Clark, and thank you, Councillor Drake, and thank you, Lorna. Okay, so I'm not seeing Joe Elworthy. Go ahead, please.
Apologies to have to jump into that debate here on the discrepancy between the outflow and the inflow. Perhaps I misread that, and I'll certainly reread it again, but my understanding is the outflow is measured at North Vancouver. That I understand. I was of the understanding, and perhaps I'm wrong, and clarify that there is an inflow where it inflows into Belcara at that particular point. And they were the discrepancies there, not so much the metering of households, that would be hugely complex and would take forever. And my understanding was that indeed that it was given back, and I don't have it in front of me after, but my understanding was given back to engineering to resolve that discrepancy between the outflow at North Vancouver and the inflow as measured at input to point A. If that exists, and I'm assuming it, I'm not an expert in this, but I'm sorry if I'm wrong on all that, but I just thought I should bring that up. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you're correct, Joe. That is just through the chair. You're correct. Yep. That is item 21. And it simply reads, do we seek a report? And I agree with you. It was asked of our engineers. That was certainly my impression, that a report on the apparent discrepancy between District of North Vancouver metering of water provided to the village and the village metering of received water. And I think, as you're suggesting, that's one measure. So they say they've given us 100,000 liters. We say we received 95. That would be the point to address. It's that particular part of the resolution does not deal with what happens when you sum all the metered readings throughout the village. That's a more complicated question. And I think that's why we ask for a report on that separately.
Understood. And if I can, through the chair, understood fully. But I do think that there was to come back with a resolution, and that should be pretty quick. I.e., is there a leak in that pipe? Are there calibration issues between Belcara and North Vancouver? Hugely important question, I think.
Yes, and that's the next item, 22. If there's a discrepancy, either resolve it or suggest how we might resolve it, or provide us a cost estimate on potential solutions. So again, these are all points that the Water Committee looked at. The Water Committee made recommendations. We've simply tried to convert them into a resolution. So we have a set of steps that the Municipal Council has agreed should be pursued. And they're just reflections of what the Water Committee recommended to us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm looking to see if anybody else has any comments to make. And Joe, you're off, I believe. Thank you. You're just looking to drop your hand, and Bruce the same. So we're almost at a clean slate there. So Bruce, I think you've answered the question about contained in the recommendations, how we best work on that feature of how we progress this and do accountability, right? So the once a month, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And I would say that from dealing with very, very complex issues, that, when you set a deadline on a lot of complex issues, it often misses, because what we want to do is take a look at which ones are falling into place quickly and which ones may need a different sort of attention. And I just speak about that when the outcome is simple and it's a complex issue, I just don't think it always is. So, I appreciate all the questions, but the committee said, give us an accountability on a monthly piece. And that's what I'm used to on these complex. So I think the questions around have been helpful, and I think we're there. I'm seeing some heads nodding. So that was a good conversation. And Bruce, we are probably ready. Are we ready now on this one to move forward on the recommendation B?
Recommendation B, yes. Yes.
Okay. So we've got, so I guess we'll need to move a motion, right, on recommendation B. That's what you outlined, Bruce?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so you do want to move it, and we'll look to get a seconder.
I thought it was moved
believe.
and seconded,
Oh.
Your Worship.
Okay, good. Way
Yeah.
ahead of me.
That's okay.
Good. Okay, so I'm not seeing any further discussion. I'll look to call the question. All those in favor as the motion is written?
Aye.
Aye.
And I'm seeing that, I think, yep, we've got everybody and it carries in the affirmative and it's unanimous. So Bruce, now you are on to recommendation A.
A. And yeah, I'd like to move that council thank the water committee members for all their work, welcome future input from committee members as individuals, and declare the work of the water committee completed.
Okay, so
Second.
we've got a mover and we got a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Clark. And we've got Joe Elworthy saying that good job so far. Okay. Bruce, do you want to,
I only wanted to say, and thank you, your worship, for the opportunity. I just wanted once again to thank the committee members, Ian, Doug, Jim, and Martin. I think we have 3 of them on tonight. They've done a phenomenal job. I don't think any of them anticipated when they began that we would end up with 31 further steps to review on a monthly basis. But the reality is there was an enormous amount of work to be done. And we've talked earlier today about being a small municipality. We are. And one of the things we have to put some attention to is to, well, the very recommendations that we've got in front of us. So I'd like to thank them once more for all they've done and look forward to further engagement by them as individuals going forward. So thank you.
okay, thank you very much, Councillor Drake. Do we have anybody else on council? Do we have any comments from the community members generally? Okay, then let's look to, not seeing anybody, I'll look to call the question. All those in favor of the recommendation that council thank the water committee members for all their work, welcome future input from committee members as individuals, and declare the work of the water committee completed. All those in favor, please.
Aye.
And I know that it is unanimous, and I know that someone coming in part way, I want to thank those committee members for the work they have done to progress this very, very complex issue. And you've done a very good job. Thank you. Okay. So we are on to bylaws, and we're on to 7.1. And we've got a bylaw in front of us to be read a 3rd time. And so we'll look for the Village of Belcarra fees and charges bylaw number 517-2018, amendment bylaw number 590-2021 be read a 3rd time. So I'll look for a mover.
Moved.
So
I-
moved. Second.
So who moved it? Sorry.
I did.
Okay, Councillor Wilder, you moved it. Councillor Clark, you seconded. Thank you very much. So it's on the floor for discussion, first by council. Anybody want to speak to that? No. Okay, any members of the audience? Looking, not seeing anyone. So I'll come back to council and I'll look to call the question. Anybody, you're clear on the question we're voting on? Yes. Okay, all those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
I note that it is carried in the affirmative and it's unanimous. 7.1. And we're on to correspondence and proclamations. And we need someone to move a councillor that items 8.1 to 8.6 be received.
So moved.
Councillor Drake
Second.
and seconder Councillor Clark. It's on the floor for discussion. Any discussion from council? Any discussion from the audience? Deborah, go ahead. Please.
Hi there.
Hello.
8.1, is that the letter to do with the barnacle?
Yes.
But right
Aren't we
now,
just
your
actually just
worship,
moving to have
we're just
everything
voting
received at
to
the moment?
receive. Yeah.
Yeah, we're just, right now, we're just receiving.
Okay,
Okay,
I'll wait till it's time for discussion.
yeah. And then, so all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, and then item 8.3, I'm going to make a request if someone will move that, will move a motion that 8.3 become an action item.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Thank you. So it's on the floor for any discussion. I just think it's an important item that we can look to do some more work on without any guaranteed outcomes. Councillor Drake.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to move similar to 8.6, Don Reed's item up for action as well.
Okay, so do you want to just, oh, so you want to combine that in with that one, okay?
No, I'm sorry. No, sorry.
Okay, so let's
deal with yours
vote
first.
on, let's vote on 8.3, just so we're tracking.
Yes,
All those, any further, Deborah, are you on 8.3?
No.
I don't,
No, I'm with
I don't think you are, so we'll come back to you if that's all right. Okay, so all those in favor of 8.3 as an action item?
aye.
Okay, aye.
Aye.
Okay, and I note that it carries, and I believe it carries unanimously in the affirmative. Okay, so we're now on to, Bruce, you wanted to add an item, and then we're gonna go, so add an item for that one right now,
Well,
Bruce.
yeah, I just that I want some discussion of 8.6. Let's move it as an action item, that the action can be the discussion, so.
Okay, so we got a mover. Do we have a seconder?
So moved. So
Okay, Councillor
seconded.
Wilder seconding. So it's now all those in favor of being an action item, which means that we
Aye.
can then discuss it. Please.
Aye.
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 Okay.
Carolina Clark in favor too.
Okay, good. Thank you. All right, so we've got 8.6 as the item, as the action item. Okay, so let's work our way through and we'll start at 8.1 in order, and then we'll add those other two for discussion. Okay, make sense? Council, yes? Okay, so item 8.1. Let's have a motion to put it on the table and someone to second it if there's one. So do we have a counselor to move this? It's 8.1, the Belcarra Barnacle. Do we have anybody that would, that's looking to move it? Nope. Okay, well, I will vacate the chair, ask the deputy mayor to do it, and I will move it on the floor for discussion and see if we can get a seconder. So
I'll second for discussion.
Yeah, so Councillor Snell, you're now chairing.
Okay, thank you for that.
Okay, is that all right? And because I've moved a motion and I just want to be free to speak to it.
Okay, so we have here a request for a grant in the amount of $1,500.
Yep.
That is the request. And any comments, please, from any other councillor?
Yeah, well, I don't mind opening up on this. I understand that there may be concerns with some, but the Belcarra Barnacle has played a pivotal role for years in our community. And I've lived in other small communities, and I know those communities would have loved the chance to have something like the Belcarra Barnacle going forward. And I think in every volunteer organization, there are times when there are challenges. And in terms of some of the things that you're trying to pull off, but I would just simply say that I think that what we get in return from the Barnacle is tremendous. And if there are concerns, I would rather people, I'm going to look to vote in favor. And if we need to offer any thoughts in our comments about where things maybe could be enhanced, that would be useful. But I would also say this, that I have unequivocally over the years always appreciated when the Belcarra Barnacle has written about the council as a whole, myself as an individual, and I have always appreciated that coverage. Sometimes in terms of the council, it has not been positive, and I've welcomed that. And sometimes in terms of me, it was on occasion critical, and I've always welcomed that too. And I don't look to go to news sources, particular the ones in our community, and look to get anything in advance. And I guess I'm always comfortable with whatever they want to report, because I think it's better than having silence. Okay, so I will yield the floor and welcome anybody else to offer any comments.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your comments, Mayor Ross. I think we're looking at two issues here. One is the whether a request at all should be granted, and the other one is the amount of the request. I see Councillor Clark, you have your hand raised.
Yes. Yes, I do. So, but I think Bruce Drake had his hand raised first. So I'm happy to wait for his comments before I put mine in. Thank you.
Okay, and thank you for that, Councillor Clark. Councillor Drake, would you mind holding back for a moment? I noticed that Deborah had her hand up at the outset, and perhaps we would like to hear from Deborah before we get further comment from council.
Absolutely.
Deborah, go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you. The Barnacle, we are truly blessed to have a good publication, like you say, having print and messages being able to get out is good. And Michelle has worked very hard getting it out. My concern, I had asked for my name to be off the letter because just around it with the letter came out with my letter on it without it being asked, and for the amount. I have had to field lots of comments from other villagers who've been upset at times with the lack of it coming out on time. I do know that there are advertisers that have also been. So the integrity of our publication is over the last at least year, which this is asking for monies for the last year. And people have been frustrated with it not coming out on time, as have the people that are volunteers on, as myself, with writing. So I'm just concerned to do with having it be a publication that we can all be proud of and go, yes, I mean, it's beautiful. And it's great having the different articles. Asking for the $1,500 with the financial statement that was given. And in the last year, there were only 9 issues rather than 10, or however the calendar year, if you go calendar year to now and asking for the money because, and the dates, because it, you know, it was coming out on the 15th of the month, the 20th of the month, and all that kind of stuff. So if we had done 10 issues, and with the amount of money that it said that was being spent, that was $437.84 to print each issue. But there were only 9, so that means actually about $486 was spent a month. And I don't know, I would just suggest maybe until things start, it's really wonderful to see somebody come alongside new on the Barnacle, Klaus Beaver's wife, Dana. So that's wonderful. And I'm hoping that it can get to a place of being back on track, so that if the Easter announcements are in, then it comes out at the beginning of the month or whatever it may be, so that it's run as something that truly represents how responsible everybody is within the community. So that was where my concern was. I wasn't agreeing with the letter going in and with that amount. So that's all I'll say.
Thank you for that. Councillor Drake.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with all the comments that were made thus far. I mean, I certainly agree with respect to the content of the Barnacle. I think whether council members or anyone else enjoys the coverage, certainly council, sorry, others are entitled to their opinion, but council really has no business meddling in the content of the Barnacle in any way, shape, or form. However, I would like to see us, like I'm surprised that we're being asked to approve the grant now, because normally on these sorts of things, it seemed to me we referred them forward to discussion at budget time as one of many potential grants that we might give out. And further to the points that Deborah has made, if we're not producing the full volume of the Barnacle, I'd like to have a bit of an explanation as to where the $1,500 amount comes from and why it's necessary. I certainly am supportive of the Barnacle. I'm certainly supportive of providing support if it's necessary, given the plans the Barnacle has. But my concern is the 1,500 may simply be there because it was 1,500 last year, and I don't know whether the financial situation the Barnacle faces justifies that particular grant. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Clark, you had another comment?
Yes, I have a few comments. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Snell. So a few comments. You know, last year and all the years, honestly very, very supportive of the Barnacle. I like the printed version. I've been collecting since I moved here. I have every single one from July 2014 until now. There's two things. I agree with Councillor Snell when he said about the amount. When I look at their year-end expense for 2019 that was provided to council, and then again on 2020, and now, well, 2018, 2019, and 2020, they provided us three in the last 3 years. On the first year, they were, when I looked at the numbers, they were shortened. So which means that if we didn't give them the money, they wouldn't be able to print. 2019, things improved a little. Apparently, they closed the year with just a little bit over $400 at the bank. And then this year, I'm seeing that they are income over expenses are at 966. So I don't see the need at this point for the 1,500. I made some comments on a couple of meetings ago about having a cap for all of our donations. And I think the donations to the Barnacle as well at this point, since that it looks that they're much more sustainable at this point than they were back in 2018 or even in 2019. So I do think that 1,500, in my view, at this point, it's a bit too much. Again, I think we should put a cap on donations that we have. But yeah, I would be happy to with 500 or 250. But that's the number that I have in mind right now. As far as issues, and you know, and like I said last year, I'm not going to stop supporting the Barnacle because of a few contentious issues. I mean, you know, I have the ones, even the ones that says some not so pleasant things to read about myself or other councillors. You know, I have it, I save it, I like it. I'm a truly believer of freedom of expression, whatever that may sound to you. So I think people should be able to come and say whatever they want, even if it's a lie. So I'm not interested in telling the Barnacle what they should post or even judging or even giving any feedback on what they post. It's not my role. My role as a council member is to look at the financials at this point when people are asking us for grants and see if it makes sense. So there's two things that I'm seeing here so far. Barnacle is making more money than they were the previous years, to the point that they're closing here without, they're not closing in deficit. They're closing here they have almost $1,000 at the bank. Another thing that bothers me a little bit, because, you know, again, because we're giving this grant, is the fact that I'm seeing in the past few months, or in the past year, really, a lot of the Barnacles are left at the mailboxes. So, which in, you know, before a few years ago, they would be gone within 2 days. So, and now they're there a month after. So, again, I'm not going to tell, you know, the volunteers what to do. And I'm so thankful that they do the job they do. But I don't, this year, I cannot justify 1,500. I still support them, but I would like to support them with a smaller amount for all of those reasons that I said. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Wilder, you had something you wish to say?
Thank you very much for your time here. I just have a couple little comments. This just goes back to, I believe it was our meeting of December 7 last year, when we gave a grant, and my comments back then are not going to be any different than they are today, which is we asked the Barnacle team to look into providing more electronic version rather than print copy to save costs. for them, because that's just the way it is. That's the way we know people like hard copy. I myself like a hard copy, but I tend to just go online now and look. That's just me. And I think that's sort of the way with most people. Anmore has gone that way. They print less copies. They still have hard copies for those people that really, really want them, but they've saved costs themselves doing it that way. And we asked them to research that last year before they brought this grant application forward this year. And I'm not sure if that's actually been done. And for those reasons, I can't support a $1,500 grant. I will support a lesser grant because I think the Barnacle is very important to the village and to all of our residents here, whether it's hard copy or in electronic print. But I think electronic print is the way for them to learn how to save some money. And I can see that their cash is not $900 in the bank. It's actually almost $3,000 according to their statement here. Assets, cash at the bank, $3,000. So I would just like to see that they save a tree and let's start going electronic.
Okay.
And print only as many as we feel that are needed. And maybe that needs to be, and I know that, I'm just gonna, sorry, I meant to cut off there, but I know that they put out a survey, gosh, maybe 9 months ago or so. I don't remember the exact date. Deborah Struck might be able to speak to this one, or actually Councillor Snell, because I believe he responded to it through the chair. But they put out a survey to say how many people want electronic version, how many people want hard copies. And I never just saw the results of that survey. So those are just my comments. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Wilder. So it seems that we have, we are supportive of the Barnacle, but we are we want to review the amount. I heard the number of 250 from Councillor Clark a short while ago. Is 250? How would one feel about that? Did you wish to respond to that, Councillor Clark?
Sure. So yeah, I'm okay with 250. I'm in between 250 and 500. And just the number that I was looking here, Lisa's saying 3,000. Sorry, I meant the number 966, income over expenses. That's the number that's most important for me, how much they bring of revenue. So sorry if I misspoke. But yeah, I think I'm okay. I'm definitely good with 250. I can put a motion on the floor. When it's appropriate, when we hear from the other councillors. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Drake, you wish to speak?
Thank you. Yeah, just so I understand where we are. We have it moved and seconded that the request be approved, right? So we're inevitably headed to a vote on that, I expect. And I would like, I guess personally, I would like to delay the level of the contribution until we're doing the financial work. As I said earlier, that's how I recall normally dealing with requests for grants of any form. But I'd also like to, ask of the Barnacle that they provide a rationale as to why that amount is being requested. My guess is it's just a duplication of what was asked the previous year. I think we're all supportive of the Barnacle, and we're all appreciative of the work that those volunteers do. And as the mayor mentioned earlier, it's a wonderful asset within the community. But having said that, I think the effort required to secure the advertising that they've been very successful at doing over the last few years, that has improved their financial situation, and the pressure that comes with that, with meeting scheduled times for putting the Barnacle on display, and considering whether they need to print the number of volume they're printing. Those are all disciplines that come with securing some of their money through advertising, in my opinion. So personally, 250 is too small as far as I'm concerned, but I'd rather have that discussion, as I say, later in the year. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you be seeking an amendment then to defer this issue until budget time?
That's what I would prefer to see, and I would like to get a message to the Barnacle that we would appreciate understanding, what adjustments they think they may be able to make in terms of their costs, what they think their potential is on advertising, and what the basis is for the request they're making.
So thank you. So I would ask the CAO in this instance then, so would the guidance be that the Belcarra Barnacle Society 21 request be denied at this time, and that an amendment come forward deferring it to budget time?
There could be a motion at this time, Deputy Mayor, to defer this matter to budget.
That's
Okay.
I'll make that motion, but Lorna, can you just explain the logistics of this? We have a motion before us. Are we then amending that motion? Because that would have to be the mover, right?
Right, or you could vote, call for the vote on this motion that we have on the floor right now. And then if that isn't successful, then make a motion to move it forward to budget.
I personally, if I might comment through the chair.
Please do.
Yes, thank you. I would prefer to avoid that option, Lorna, because frankly, I don't want to vote against the request that we have before us. I simply want to say that we will defer it. So if we can modify this, if there's agreement to do it, I would rather just defer it to our financial discussions and request further information from the Barnacle, as I said before, as to what means they believe they have to reduce their costs, increase their revenue, and what the basis is of the request of us.
Okay, thank you for that. The CEO, do you have enough detail there to be able to get that correctly on paper?
Yes,
thank you. So if you could hold that thought and you keep it fresh in your mind, Councillor Drake, if you wouldn't mind. Yeah. And we'll take a question from Councillor Wilder and then one from Joe Elworthy. Councillor Wilder, please go ahead.
My brief comment is that I believe that this has always come forward in November from the Barnacle, and through the chair to maybe possibly Deborah Strutt would know that. I always seem to remember it came up in November when they asked for a grant. It's just, it might have something to do with the year ends, or I'm not really quite sure. So I just wanted to put that comment on the table.
Yes, thank you for that. Thank you for that comment. And that, in fact, does take it through to our budget time. Okay, is your hand still up, Councillor Drake?
No.
Okay, thank you. Joe, your question, please.
Thank you, Councillor Snell. And I guess I'm sorry for the protocols, because probably it should have been council to deal with. I wasn't sure you'd gone to the audience, and but if you have, and then I'll comment in any case. And my comment is, I'm somewhat surprised that there's nobody from the Barnacle, other than the fact that they submitted the letter, which is fine. It's good, and I'd be very cautious. I mean, to me, I think everybody's heard from everybody there about their support of it. We spent a good time debating what is the voice of Belcarra from the public out there here, and I would caution against any motions that would limit the voice, that public voice, by saying we would not support it. The portrayal on how that could come back, for whether it's 1,000, 250, whatever it is, by all means, find out what it is. But we can't be here, council, I don't think can be here discussing on how the Belcarra should run their newspaper because they asked for a donation, because they asked for some support, which presumably is justified in the letter with the accounting. I guess not, from what I'm hearing there. So I'd be very cautious. So whatever, defer, table, get back, get a report from them, get some input if you have to. But I'd be careful about crossing a very fine line on the whole issue of public opinion.
Thank you for that. One point I would make is that the Barnacle does appear is online copies are available through our own website. So I think we do support the whilst we have no control, council has no control over the content or the editorial material of the Barnacle. It does support it every month by making it available online through the village website, and I think that's a good point. I come back now to our CAO and just to review the amendment that was proposed by Councillor Drake.
What I have is that the request from the Barnacle Society for a grant in the amount of $1,500 be approved. And then Councillor Drake's amendment would be to defer that request to budget discussions and ask for details on the rationalization of the $1,500.
Okay, is there someone to second that amendment? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, all right, so we have
Councillor Wilder seconded it.
so okay, Councillor Wilder second, and so we put that one to the all in favor of that one? Can we put
Okay,
I
whoa,
think-
whoa, Chair.
Yeah,
Acting
technically.
Chair,
Technically, it's a
Discussion.
problem.
if you could reach out and have some discussion on that,
sure,
would be helpful.
by all means?
Thank you. Appreciate that.
You have your hand raised, Mayor Ross.
I do. And I speak very reluctantly because the people in this room, I think, are people that I certainly value their thoughts, but I have trepidation. And I think Joe Elworthy spoke to this a bit too. I have a worry that they have come, and I don't know what happened when I wasn't on council for that first period of time, but my recollection is they come in November. And so they've come and they've done their due diligence. And I'm one of those people that believe that we need to be really careful because we're the political people in this village right now. And so I know no one's doing it with any malice, but to talk about how they should run things, I think is a line that, I'm not going to vote in favor of this amendment. I think if we want to do anything, we should defeat the amendment. We should look to, I'll look to support the number, and it may not carry. But if we're going to do anything, we should ask for things in advance going forward. And I understand just from general discussion in the village that this is a time where there's been challenges, and I don't know a volunteer organization that does not have them. So I believe in signaling what I'm going to do. And so I'm not going to support something that's going to cut the amount of money, but I would be interested in passing that amount of money and then signaling to them in a very general way about without going into details. And I don't say that in a disrespectful way to any of my colleagues, but Joe Elworthy outlined what I think is a good line that we should not collectively pass in terms of starting to say you should do this, you should do this. We should just simply say either give the money and come back with an overall piece, or don't give the money. And I'm fine wherever we end up on that. Thank you. Thanks, Chair, Deputy Chair. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mayor Ross. Councillor Drake.
Yes, I mean, I don't think any of us were planning to spend this long on the topic for the sake of whatever the differences between the 1,500 requested and where we end up. But I'd like to ask through the chair, the mayor, whether I could agree with you on the significance of a political gesture. I mean, without any way of avoiding it, this council's decision is going to be seen as a political gesture. So the amount is not nearly as important as the gesture, so that if the request is not granted and there's a modification, that's going to be seen as a criticism. And I agree with Joe that one needs to be very careful about that. What about a scenario in which we did approve the requested grant, but then sent a signal that there would be much greater scrutiny in subsequent years? As to the justification for the amount being requested, nobody's objecting to any aspect of the Barnacle's operation, nor is anyone trying to tell the Barnacle how they manage things. The question is the amount, I guess if we granted the amount, but signaled that we would want a more detailed explanation next year, might that have the desired effect? I simply want them to pay attention to the potential to raise revenue through advertising and maintain a pattern of publication that will, help secure that advertising. So that's a very convoluted question to Mayor Ross, because what I hear him saying is we should stay totally away from any commentary as to how the Barnacle is operated.
Is that a question through the chair to me?
It is, yeah. Yeah, it is. Because
okay.
I may be wrong, but I took your comment to be, you should say yay or nay on this request, but don't wade into the operation of the Barnacle. And it's not, editorial content, it's rather how it is operated. And I guess I'm wondering how you would feel about approving the request this year, but indicating we would want more detail in subsequent years.
Okay, through the chair.
Yeah.
Okay.
You wish to respond?
Yep. So I will do that, and I appreciate your comments. I would say this in answer, that we could look to grant the request for this year and indicate that council is going to look at reducing grants going forward in terms of all groups or individual organizations that we give grants to. So we signal you have it now, and we're not talking anything about your operation, but we're looking, because I've heard a number of times, we would look to do some sort of a capping, which for some reason I thought we had, but regardless, it'd be a way to signal without any reference to anything. But going forward, if you're in the village of Belcare or you approach the village of Belcare, we're going to look in some systemic way to try and reduce those grants. So.
Yeah, I could accept that. I appreciate this is a side conversation, but that's an approach that I would be comfortable with. It does signal that they may want to pay close attention to how much they're seeking from us, and at the same time grants the request this year. So I don't know where the rest of council is, but I would be comfortable with that.
Thank you. This is getting messy.
I thought my resolution was going to be messy.
Okay, I think it is I'm cognizant of the time. Maybe take a step back here. We have a recommendation that a request for a grant to the amount of 1,500 be approved. And did someone make that motion?
That was moved and seconded. And if I might, John, we have two people who will support it with a subsequent resolution that would follow probably, but we need to know if there's one other council member that's enthusiastic.
We also have a motion to defer on the floor.
Okay, so I need some guidance here, please, CEO.
If council's ready, I'm not sure they are, they could vote on the motion to defer first.
Okay, I see. Councillor Clark, you have your hand raised.
Thank you. A quick comment before I call the vote on the deferral. I don't see that as a binary choice where it's either all or nothing. I understand every decision we make might be seen as a political decision because after all, we are politicians. So, I hate to say that, but that's where we are here. Like we're part of council. I've said it in the past, I'll say it again. I'm supportive of the Barnacle. I am not interested in telling them how to run the Barnacle because I have too much on my plate. I don't need any more. And yeah, it's not a binary choice. I'm going to support the deferral at this point. If 250 is too little, I'm willing to do 500. But in my view, 500 should be a cap for each donation that we do. I think there should be a cap. And to me, my personal cap for donations is $500. Thank you. And I'd like to call the question on the deferral, or else we're going to be here all night.
Okay. Councillor Wilder.
Thank you. I'll just be very brief. I'm going to go back to the meeting of December 7th, 2020, when I asked them to discuss within themselves reducing their own costs, printing costs. And this letter that they've given us, of which nobody is here tonight to even speak to it. Not one of them are here to speak to it. They say that they want to use the $1,500 to cover additional costs for increasing pricing for printing. I can't be in favor of this because of that. I'm sorry.
Deputy Mayor Snow, when there's been a call for the question, you need to call the vote.
Okay. So the question that we're calling the vote on now is for the deferral?
That's correct.
Okay. Okay, I'll call the question. Those in favor of the deferral?
Aye.
Aye.
I will go for a deferral.
Okay. So the deferral.
Sorry, can we have that count again? I didn't see everyone's hands. Councillor Drake, Councillor
Yes.
Wilder, and Councillor Clark voted in favor of deferral. And
So
Councillor
I think you had Councillor Snell as well.
Yes, that's right.
and Councillor
Yeah,
Snell.
yes.
So,
And I'm prepared to register my vote when it's my turn, but I'm not voting in favor. So it would be inappropriate to do that right now. So if the acting chair calls for the votes in the negative, I will provide mine.
Okay. So we'll call for the vote for the deferral. Those in favor? Any
I
more
have been
discussion?
in favor. So
Okay,
now
yeah.
it's the vote
Okay.
in opposition.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
But you need to ask for the vote in opposition, please.
Just waiting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so sorry, run that by me again.
Okay, so we have the vote in favor,
Yes,
and now you need to just ask for the vote in opposition.
okay. There was a vote in opposition. That was noted.
Well, if you call for the any negative vote.
Okay, I'll call for the negative vote.
Thank you. And
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And so the deferral is carried.
Okay, thank you.
So that's the end of the discussion.
Thank you.
And also I would remind Mayor Ross, if you're assuming the chair,
I'm assuming
that
the
it is
chair.
now 10:50 and we should have a motion to extend the meeting. Please.
Yeah. So I'm now, thank you, Councillor Snell, and it would be in order if there is a motion to extend the meeting and for how much time.
I'll move a motion to extend the meeting until 11:10.
Okay, that's appropriately on the floor. Looking for a seconder.
Second.
Councillor Drake. All right. Any speakers on this, council? Seeing none, I'll look to call the question. All those in favor? Aye. Okay, that gives us some time to move forward to 11:10. And then at that point, we'll be finished. Correct? Okay, so we are on, we've done that item. We've got item 8.2, and then we've got a couple of other items that were added on to action items. So on 8.2, it is that November 2021 be declared as Adoption Awareness Month in the Village of Belcarra. I'm going to look for a mover and a seconder.
I will move that item.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wilder, and Councillor Clark. Thank you for seconding. It's on the floor for any discussion. Seeing any discussion? I'm not seeing any. I'm going to go to the audience. I'm not seeing any in there. I'm coming back and I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of the motion as written, that
Aye.
November 21 be declared as Adoption Awareness Month in the Village of Belcarra. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 And note that it carries and it is unanimous. So that is done. And then we have 8.3 that became an action item, I believe, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so and there's other ones too, but let's do this one. And I'll look for the letter from Honorable David Eby, Attorney General and Minister responsible for housing, be referred to staff for follow-up. And I'll look for a motion from a councillor to do that.
So moved.
Councillor Clark, thank you, and seconded by Councillor
I'll second.
Drake. So it's on the floor appropriately. Any input from council? Anything from our community members? Not seeing anything. I'll come back and I'll look to call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. And I note that it's unanimous and it's carried in the affirmative. Okay. And then I believe we have Bruce, I think you moved for discussion 8.6, is that correct?
8.6, yes, it's
Yeah.
a letter from Don Reed pertaining to a park designation that appeared on an early map for that portion of public land on Turtle Head. I think council members will have received some information from former Mayor Drew, who of course is an historian, has pored over many of these documents many times. And I think within his response, there may be an answer to Don's question. I'm just concerned that Don asks the question, especially in his last paragraph, and it appears we have not yet provided him with an answer to that question. But frankly, I think it needs some further discussion with council. To briefly summarize it, an early map showed park, and insofar as I can tell from the correspondence I've seen, park was simply a term that was used either because it was space that wasn't allocated as lot on Turtle Head, or because park was possibly appealing, since the real estate business hasn't changed a lot, it was an appealing concept for people you were trying to sell summer cottages to back 125 odd years ago. And since then, I guess what Don has seen, I assume, is that there are some zoning bylaws which do not show it as park any longer. And he's curious as to whether that ever has formally been changed. The point, I gather, is that the fact that it appeared as park on an earlier map was of no significance insofar as its designation. But we need ultimately to deal with that. I don't think we have to wrestle with it tonight. I would be quite happy to just see this pushed on to our next meeting, at which point perhaps we can come to a conclusion on it. It's the question.
Your
Yeah.
worship, I would just provide a little update. I did reply to Don Reed's letter that was on our previous agenda, and I
Right.
advised him that older map that indicated there was a park in that location, that there wasn't a park, and that the property belongs to the Village of Belcarra. And then I also received the update from former Mayor Drew.
Yep.
And I believe if I provided more detail to Don Reed, that he would perhaps be more pleased with the response.
So you're planning to provide him with more information?
I would if council requested.
Oh, well, I'll make that request then.
Okay. because I did reply at last time,
Yeah.
but then he wrote this letter subsequently.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, his point being, I guess, that he wants to know what the status of it is insofar as be it park or otherwise, and if it isn't park, how did it get changed? And I guess I take it from what we've seen from Ralph, it never was anything other than someone deciding to write park on an old map.
Middle of the road.
Is your
Yeah.
motion, Bruce, that staff be requested to provide further information to Don Reed on
You
this issue of park
you-
designation?
You've taken the words out of my mouth, yeah.
So we're looking for a seconder.
I'll second that.
Okay, good. Thank you. Any further from council? Looking, and I am looking quickly because of the time, but if anybody in the community wants to do, I'm not seeing, so I'll come back and I'll look to call the question on the motion. And we're clear about the motion, right, Lorna?
Yes, your worship.
Okay, and thank you for your suggestion. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye, and it looks like it is the affirmative carry and it's unanimous. So I'll just check I confirm that we are now finished those items that are action, correct? Yes?
Yes, your worship.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any others, so we'll progress ahead. So we're on new business. Okay, and I'm not seeing any new business from council, so we're on public question period. And we have a routine that we go through. So so let's look at if we got any questions or comments related to the topics on the council meeting agenda. Do we have that from anybody? Okay. I'm canvassing from the audience, the community members. I'm not seeing anybody with anything from the council meeting agenda. If there is something that another question, we'll be prepared to take that. So I'm not seeing that from anybody in the audience. So I'm going to make one last call. I've made the call. And so I'm going to suggest that we've concluded public question period.
So move that the meeting be adjourned.
Okay, that's in order. And
Second.
there seconder, and that's in order. And so I would look to at this point call the question. All those in favor? Aye.
In favor, aye.
Okay, and it's the carries in the affirmative, and
Aye.
I would
Yay.
note that it's 10:59.
Very good.
Read it in. Thank you, everybody. Good work. Much appreciated. Take care.
Thank
Have
you,
a good
staff,
night.
for all your time.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you too.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone, for
everybody.
coming out tonight.
Thank
Yep,
you.
You bet.
Good night.
Thank you.